Good morning, everyone. This is the Committee on Law and Government. We have a quorum. Vice Chairman, Councilman Green, Councilman Jones, Councilwoman Sanchez, and Councilwoman Bass, and myself, Bill Greenlee. Ms. Marconi, will you please read the title of the first bill, please?
Bill number 180943, an ordinance amending Chapter 9-1100 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Fair Practices Ordinance, Protections Against Unlawful Discrimination by adding a new section prohibiting retail establishments from refusing to accept cash as a form of payment, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you. Before we call first witnesses, I just want to make a very brief statement. When Councilwoman Sanchez and I first introduced this bill, it was for a very basic reason. I'm looking at a good old $1 bill with George Washington on it, and it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. But we have found recently that there's a number of places, and they seem to be growing, that you can't go in and get a cup of coffee, a salad, a sandwich, you would not be able to get it if you just had cash. You have to have a credit card. There's something really seems wrong with that, basically because the people who are shut out of that process, that don't have credits, that are what's called unbanked, overwhelmingly are low income, minority, immigrants. And when you start separating people, even if it's not intentional, for basic services, for basic rights, even if you're not doing it intentionally, in my opinion, that's discrimination. And that's why we put this bill in. All we're asking folks to do, businesses to do, is accept the green stuff that had been accepted for centuries, okay? It doesn't stop anybody from using credit. It doesn't stop any business from accepting any credit they want, but they also have to take cash for basic consumer services. So, no, okay. So with that, unless there's any other comments from the committee, Ms. Marconi, why don't you call the first two people up?
Rue Landau and Sylvie Geller-Howard.
And while they're coming up, I just want to make a general statement, which is almost always ignored. If you have written testimony, you do not have to read the whole testimony. It will be made part of the record. The whole testimony will be part of the record, and you could summarize your statements if you see fit. Thank you very much. Whoever would like to go first?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Greenlee, Councilmember Quinones Sanchez, and members of the Committee on Law and Government for giving me the opportunity to testify regarding Bill number 180943, prohibiting establishments from refusing to accept cash as a form of payment. I'm Rue Landau, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations. The Commission enforces the city's Fair Practices Ordinance, the law that prohibits discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations, and the delivery of city services. And this law will be amended by this bill. Philadelphia has led the nation in its civil rights initiatives over the years, amending the Fair Practices Ordinance and other laws to provide stronger protections for groups who experience bias and discrimination, harassment and hate, or experience exclusion as a result of opportunity inequalities. As we embrace the changing trends towards a digital e-commerce economy characterized by conveniences like online purchases, ride-sharing, phone apps, and digital wallets on our smartphones, we are quick to appreciate the innovation and entrepreneurship that makes such advances possible. Yet we also must acknowledge that the trend towards a cashless consumer experience is not inclusive and accessible by all. Presently, a significant number of Philadelphia residents who are unbanked or underbanked for a variety of social and financial reasons have been excluded from doing business with cashless establishments. Financial inclusion in a cashless economy relies on either an established bank account or, as an alternative, convenient access to a low-fee prepaid card system similar to SEPTA's cash-accepting kiosks or other prepaid methods. Understanding the many reasons city residents are unbanked or do not use bank cards is important to knowing why solely promoting and supporting access to bank accounts is not a solution to create equity in people's cash versus cashless purchasing power. Many of these unbanked households must overcome obstacles such as poverty, unemployment, inefficient state-issued ID and documentation, reintegration into the community from prison, language barriers, financial and technological literacy, or a general distrust of banks and plastic spending. Studies have shown that barriers to banking disproportionately impacts Black and Hispanic households. Business models only accepting cashless transactions can disproportionately impact already struggling and marginalized residents by excluding unbanked consumers. Cashless business models may have the potential for advantages such as increasing efficiencies, revenues, safety, customer convenience, and even environmental sustainability. While this economic trend moving toward a future with a greater reliance upon digital, online, and bank card purchases may be inevitable, considering the number of unbanked residents in our city, the ability to access and enjoy these conveniences only benefits the more privileged consumers in our city. We must first assure that residents and visitors in Philadelphia are treated equally and not excluded from purchasing goods and services from cashless establishments. Bill number 180943, as amended, strikes the right balance between providing access to all Philadelphians and excluding certain electronic business transactions. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Sylvia, before you say testify, and then we'll take questions, record should reflect Councilwoman Gim, member of the committee, is present, and Councilman O, also a member of the committee, is present. I think we have a full quorum here. Please, identify yourself, proceed.
This on? Yes. Good morning, Chairman Greenlee, Councilwoman Quinones-Sanchez, and the members of the Committee on Law and Government. My name is Sylvie Gallier-Howard, and I'm First Deputy at the Department of Commerce. I'm here today to provide testimony on Bill number 180943. I would like to start by thanking Councilmember Greenlee and Councilmember Quinones-Sanchez for opening up this important dialogue. We've had a number of discussions, and we appreciate the time that we were provided to research the matter, as well as your consideration of our suggestions and feedback, including the amendments incorporated today. This bill highlights the challenges that come with modernization. Although cashless retail establishments do not exist in significant numbers today in Philadelphia, fewer than many of our peer cities based on our research, we are confident that this business model will proliferate in the near future. Indeed, many of our transactions already reflect our increasing preference for online shopping: Amazon, Uber, Lyft, grocery, and other delivery services. In fact, according to studies, only 5 to 10% of millennials choose to use cash today. In China, entire cities are cashless, and in India, the country has an initiative called Cashless India to prepare all of its residents for the future economy. We have a significant population in Philadelphia that is unbanked and underbanked and cannot access critical financial resources such as a mortgage, educational, or small business loans. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that 5.8% of households in the Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington metropolitan statistical area were unbanked, and 22.3% were underbanked in 2017. Five-year estimates between 2013 and 2017 show that 57.2% of households in the MSA that earn less than $15,000 were unbanked or underbanked. This statistic is alarming and is something we must work to address as a city. In our conversations, Council Members Greenlee and Quinones-Sanchez expressed their desire to ensure that all Philadelphians have access to every retail option. This is certainly a goal that we commend and share. We also believe that this bill alone will not address the core issue of the financial barriers far too many Philadelphians face. If Philadelphia decides to press pause on this business model, the city must also accelerate our efforts to develop policies and programs that will get our communities banked so they will have access to the cashless economy when it becomes the norm in the U.S. and globally. As a city, we constantly seek to strike the balance of growing our economy while ensuring our growth is inclusive. This issue is at the heart of that challenge. At some point, probably in the near future, a ban on cashless businesses could impact our competitiveness as a city, which would negatively impact those that are already the most disadvantaged. And because we know that inclusion is very difficult to achieve without growth, we must prepare our city for the rapid pace of modernization. With this end in mind, Commerce stands ready to work with City Council, other city agencies, the Financial Empowerment Center, and community nonprofits to find solutions and strategies that create access to the modern economy, just as India is doing for its people. Under the umbrella of the Smart City Task Force announced through an executive order just yesterday, we will redouble our efforts to research and monitor trends in modernization so that Philadelphia is best positioned to thrive in this rapidly changing world. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple quick questions, Ms. Howard. You say the city also believes this bill alone will not address the core issue, financial barriers. I think everybody agrees on that. We're not saying this bill solves every problem, obviously, of the unbanked, underbanked. But is it fair to say right now there is a significant portion of Philadelphians that are shut out of regular consumer or regular ability to access certain businesses because they don't have a credit card? Is that a fair statement?
So based on our research, there's 9 businesses that are sort of chains that use this model, this cashless model across the country. And I don't think 9 of them, but maybe 5 or so exist here in Philadelphia. They will take prepaid cards, so it's not necessarily that you need to be banked to access those services, but they will not take cash. So it's true that there's a large population that is not banked and underbanked, and so it is definitely a barrier for them.
Okay. And I know you say only 5 to 10% of millennials choose to use cash today. There are other residents in the city besides millennials, correct? Just for the record.
Yes, that is
Okay.
absolutely true.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure we got that on the record. Yeah. We're all for millennials, but they're not alone. Okay. Councilman Sanchez, and then Councilman Green. Looks like everybody.
Okay. In your research for like cashless India and others, were those jurisdictions, do they have their own like municipal bank? How do they get their cities to be cashless or countries?
I didn't see a municipal bank in India, but they have like 10 different products that they're using, and they're actually doing a lot to incentivize people to move to, if they're not banked, they're using prepaid cards. Even in places like Africa, they're just moving straight to mobile technology without any need for a bank account. So I don't know, I'd have to look into whether there's municipal bank accounts.
I know this council has had hearings about municipal bank and helping the unbanked, and I would hope that the Smart Cities Task Force look at that as part of its challenge about how do you really get there, right? And I think the market, we can't control the private market, but we can absolutely incentivize, right, what we do as a government. And I just want to remind folks from the record, when we use our community block grant money to build infrastructure in the city, it really does speak to our values about people having access to everything, right? And so sending a message that everyone is welcomed is hugely important as a city, and I think it's a value that this council shares. And I look at this as, I don't want anybody to feel excluded anywhere, right? So it's really important. So I appreciate your work on this. Rue, always appreciate you keeping it real. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. I hope I'm in order here. Councilman Green? No, Jones was first? No. Jim was first. I thought you were first. Councilman Green.
I was just trying
Everybody's being
to
so
be
nice today.
hospitable to my colleagues. Okay.
We all try to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Councilwoman Sanchez, to bring up the issue of municipal banking or public banking. That's an issue that I've been discussing with the city and the administration for some time. I'm glad that the administration issued the RFP a few weeks ago so that we can bring in some research to further explore the concept of public banking in the city of Philadelphia. But Councilman Sanchez brought up the issue of cashless India. And I know India is probably one of the, if not the largest democracy in the world, but they also have a large poverty issue and concern. So as they are moving forward on this cashless India perspective, how are they dealing with the issues of poverty and those who may be unbanked?
So my understanding that the perspective that the government of India has taken, and I think it's the 3rd most impoverished country in the nation, in the world, is that they need to, rather than try to stop modernization from happening in their country, they need to, as a government, bring their people along, which is what I would like Philadelphia. I would love for Philadelphia to be in that place, that we're bringing people towards modernization. So, I think that basically what they're doing is they're giving out, I think, free cards. So, right now you can get a prepaid credit card, which is not, you don't have to have credit, you can just go and buy it, and then you can go to 7-Eleven or Walgreens, CVS, and refill that card, but you have to pay a fee. So I think in India, they don't charge a fee to have that card. So they're really trying to get all people to have access to that. I don't know, how far along they are in the process. But I will point out one thing. The City of Philadelphia also has this business practice. In the City of Philadelphia, you cannot use cash or personal check to get married. And there's other fees and permits where we don't accept cash. So we're telling businesses they can't, but we do the same thing.
For the record, I think that's a problem, but I'll leave that go for the time being, okay? You might have to change that.
Also, you mentioned Africa, and it made me reflect on, and also technology, because I actually have two friends from college that live in Africa. One, Mike, has been there since 1995, and Steve has been there since 2001. And I remember when Mike first moved there, in order to get a landline, it was about 2.5 year wait. And technology was still in its infancy. And then when cell phones became more and more prominent, most people said, well, I don't even need a cell phone. I don't even need a landline, I'll just use my cell phone. And you made reference to the fact that people are using technology more and more for transactions. I think about institutions like Grameen Bank and others are using technology. And so you talked about future competitiveness, and do you see a concern in reference to how technology, and some people are now using their phone as their bank and for all kinds of transactions?
So some of you know I lived in Ecuador for 5 years. It's a similar thing where a lot of the rural communities didn't have landlines, and the cost for the government to put in the infrastructure for landlines was so expensive that most people just skipped straight to cell phones once cell phones came into place. And it saved the country money, and it was, at the end of the day, was what everybody was using anyhow. I think that the reality is people are moving to using their phones for anything they possibly can. Obviously, not every single person has a phone, but the vast majority do. And in places like Africa and India and the developing countries, those countries have used technology to help provide people access. So in Africa, there are people in rural communities that are they're getting loans, and they're paying them back, literally, even flip phones, they're paying them back through their phones. They don't have to go to a bank, they don't need to travel long distances. So I think that there's always risk of exclusion with technology and modernization, but there's also a lot of opportunity to create more parity and more access with technology.
Okay. Ms. Landau, I'm curious in reference to the legislation. Going forward, for those entities that are in the city of Philadelphia currently that operate a cashless business, after the legislation goes into effect, how would they be impacted from your understanding, since you were the enforcement?
Someone would file a complaint with our office, we'd investigate, it'd be a pretty quick investigation, and we could assess a fine, hold a hearing in front of our commissioners, and assess a fine.
Okay. And then one final question. I know that the city's engaged, and since we're talking about India and Africa, the city's engaged in doing some type of branding from a global perspective. And how do you think this impacts that issue, considering that you would have a conversation on competitiveness and other concerns?
So that was one of my initial concerns, because when we did a study of social media, and indices about how Philadelphia fares in terms of perception, we found that Philadelphia's perception lags its performance, and that Philadelphia, based on that research, is not well known, and Brookings Institution did that research, that we're not well known as a place to bring your business to innovate or to invest in. And so, my initial reaction was, this is going to make us look like a less attractive place to innovate because we've put barriers around innovation. So I think that I understand that this right now it's this business model, there's not a lot of it yet. And if we need to press pause and basically be in a transition period where we get people ready for it, I understand, how that helps protect our most disadvantaged, and that's a very laudable goal. But I really hope it's a transition period and a pressing pause, and that at some point we get people ready, because modernization is going to happen with or without Philadelphia, and we want to be part of it.
And then lastly, considering the number of unbanked people we have in our city, how will we get people ready for that type of cashless society when we have so many people that don't have access to banks, don't have a bank account, or, from my experience when I was at Meridian Bank at Broad and Glenwood, and we have what I call the high cost of poverty, where people are paying the most for all of their services, for cars, or if they don't have a car, just transportation, for furniture because they're going to rental stores, or they don't come to the bank when we could open an account for them. They got to check cash in locations and other things. So how will we make that transition when we do have people who are unbanked who still rely on cash for their day-to-day business?
Well, I don't have a full answer, but I've been thinking about it. And maybe there'd be a way to utilize, we're going to institute the municipal ID. Maybe there could be a second iteration where those cards could be something where you load money onto it and you could use it in a cashless business. Maybe through SEPTA, I know with SEPTA, the SEPTA key card, if you register it within 30 days, you get your $5 back. And if you maintain a certain balance, you don't have to pay fees. Maybe we can work with SEPTA and come up with a solution, since most people have SEPTA key cards or are getting SEPTA key cards. I'm hoping that, I think there's a lot of technological solutions potentially. At some point, as these businesses proliferate, somebody's going to come up with an app. Now, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for people who don't have phones, but I think, those are some of the quick answers I have, but I think we need to really explore this, and I'm not an expert in this field. I think I would love to work with our, partners, our nonprofit partners and financial literacy partners to get the answer to that question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Before I go to the next, I think when you mentioned SEPTA key card, that's a little different, though. You can get the key card by putting cash in the machine, right, to get the key card, correct?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm saying that the SEPTA key card has a partnership with MasterCard, that you can use it as a debit card.
So there's that option. You can do cash or you can do with a debit card, correct?
Right, but so people could use that debit card in a cashless business as a form of currency, so maybe that could be an option.
Okay.
And yeah, there's other prepaid cards like that.
Okay, everybody kind of put their light on at the same time, so I don't know. I think Councilman Jones might have been next.
Nope.
Is that right?
No, get them done, Jones.
Well, okay. Now, well, what about
I'll do
Councilman?
it.
You'll be last. Okay.
I'm after David.
You're after David. Okay. All right. Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I want to thank the sponsors of the legislation for moving forward on this important issue. I also wanted to point out that I believe that a number of different organizations and groups have signed on in support of this,
Yes.
including Community Legal Services, 215 Pennsylvania Alliance, Jobs with Justice, a number of groups representing our immigrant communities, including Asian Americans United, Viet Lead, and Restaurant Opportunity Center, among many others. It's also worth noting that Massachusetts and New Jersey yesterday imposed a statewide ban on cashless businesses.
Right.
Massachusetts has an anti-cashless business provision in its state code. So I want to make it clear that what we are embarking on here in the city of Philadelphia is something that a lot of important statewide initiatives are actually looking at, not just for municipalities, but across the state. And I also, just want to be thoughtful that we don't confuse technological gadgetry with modernization. Inequality is not progress. Refusing and speeding forward when your communities are incredibly poor and that people struggle with poverty, not just whether they have a bank card, but they actually struggle with poverty. So we have to be careful that promoting ideas that are desperately create or expand inequality is not anyone's definition of what's modern or should be progressive. It is certainly technological, gadgetry that is in play. And so, as we move forward on this conversation, I'm definitely interested in hearing. I'm sensitive to the ideas of what's at issue in terms of perception. But I do think that our concern and the main, impetus behind this legislation is to deal with the fact that we cannot afford to exacerbate inequality in the city, intentional or not. If the outcome is the same, it is not something that the city should be advancing, especially now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And the letter you referenced will be made part of the record, along with a letter from Brian Bailey at Cartronics, also supporting the legislation. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I, too, join the chorus of members who support at least vetting this idea. Some of the issues that I have, and I come from a background of dealing with commerce and economic development from way back to my PCDC days or my minority business enterprise days. And so I speak from an experience of dealing with that constituency. There is a place in my district between 58th and 59th and Market. It is called the Crimson Cafe. And if you are a soul food connoisseur, you have entered into paradise. They have a million different ways to make you go to sleep. If you're looking for a healthy alternative, do not go there. The point, though, for a very long time, new struggling business, they did not accept plastic. They could not accept plastic for whatever reasons. They were excluded from that particular medium. They could not accept a smartphone. Technologically, they weren't there. They could not get swipes or anything like that. What they could accept is the traditional tender of the United States of America and its Treasury. They have evolved since then, but a lot of their constituents at 58th, 59th, and Market are that 27% that my colleagues speak of that are underemployed. Their cash comes in irregularly, so they can't maintain those kinds of banking relationships that they should have. And so when they get money, working odd jobs, they're usually paid in this kind of currency. And they then go to an establishment that accepts this type of currency. As we create these rungs of allowing people, they use these young people, millennials, and I love them. I love them, I have so many of them. Use cash apps. They use cash apps and other devices now and are slowly evolving. But their parents and their grandparents still have cash under the bed mattress and still use it as such. We are not there yet to be able to go to that kind of medium to exchange goods and services. We do need, as you said, to press the pause button to allow more people to catch up to the rest of the world, both businesses, I might add, and consumers. So our fear is that, and finally, that no matter what you do, you can't steal this identity. You can't become this $20 bill. You can become me, and I'm carefully covering so that my number, so that no one on can get. Oh, you did. See, that's how easy it can happen. He's proving my point.
Proving your point.
So we have to be careful as we evolve, because you don't have to wait for one news cycle where one big consumer company says, oh, by the way, somebody stole all my information and your stuff is out there. So I want us to allow technology to provide different rungs of the ladder for people. And before we outlaw cash, we should consider how many more options we can evolve to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman O?
Thank you very much. I oppose the bill, primarily around the fact that I don't think it's a role of government to tell business people what to do. You can innovate, you can take risk, it might work, it might not work. I don't really think that's our role. I understand the good purpose, I'm just saying I disagree with it. But what I do want to understand, so from a January 15th Wall Street article, the article pointed out that for every $100 in cash, the handling fees are 11.4%. By not using cash, the handling fees are 1.5 to 3%, which has allowed businesses that don't take cash to offer lower priced items to consumers because of lower overall costs. And the issue of how we provide debit cards or credit cards on a cash purchase basis without fees is, to me, kind of the more beneficial idea. Whether you can do it at the subway or whether you could do it at a bank or you could do it at a police station or supermarket, put in $100, get your card without cost. I understand you could open a bank account at Broad Street Ministries, But from what you're saying, that the way that countries around the world who have been dealing with poverty are going to use technology to provide better spending power, greater options to those who are poor, less need to handle and have cash, less risk of robbery, other things, is something that resonates with me as I study the global economy. Everything you've said indicates to me that you have an opinion. However, your opinion, is that the opinion of the Commerce Department? Because it seems like the Commerce Department is saying we don't really have an opinion. We're not saying yay or nay, but everything you said sounds like a nay to me. Could you clarify that?
Sure. I think that our opinion is that we don't want to reduce the competitiveness of the city, but if we need to press pause, if this is a transitional phase, I think we can be okay with that. That's the opinion of the Commerce Department. I think Rue and I are, we're within a zone together. So as the administration, I think we share, as an administration, the one thing I can absolutely say is we share the concerns of City Council in terms of making sure that no one is left behind. We absolutely share that, and we feel a lot of conviction about the fact that we need to get people prepared for this because it's coming. I don't know when, but it's coming. So, I think that ideally if we can use technology and modernization to help bridge those gaps and lessen the digital divide, lessen the economic divide, let's try to do that.
Are you in favor of the bill or opposed to the bill? Hey, listen, I'm friends with people on council. I plainly say I disagree with them. They plainly say they disagree with me. It's not because I'm a bad person. We obviously have disagreements. It's not a big deal. Then we vote and somebody wins, But I think honesty about what you think is very important. We want to deal with poverty. I think this is a bad way to do it. They think it's a great way to do it. What does the Commerce Department think?
Well, I think we speak from the position of the administration, and Rue and I have both had a lot of debates about this, and we've talked to a lot of people about it, and it's not a black and white situation. I know for some people it is, but there's been certain people that we've talked to that have said, why would you ever do that? Why would you prevent modernization? And there's other people who say, it seems unfair for those businesses not to accept cash. So based on those conversations, based on the research, and Councilman Greenlee gave us some time to do research, to talk to businesses, what we came out with was this is a really new thing, and we're okay with pressing pause. But we initially talked about potentially having a sunset on this. I think that we would love to have a sunset so we can revisit it. But regardless, we can always revisit it. And at some point, it might be that the pressure causes us to revisit it. We would ideally like to focus more on getting people access. But if we need to press pause to protect people so that they can have access while we work on that, then we just need to do that really quickly. So it's a nuanced position, but that's kind of where we are. Is that fair?
Councilman,
Did you guys work this out beforehand?
I have.
I've been asking that for a while, Councilman.
In my 10 years in my position, I have never had so much discussion about what would be a one line item amendment to our law ever. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of people falling in many different categories, including some surprising people who you would think one way and think another way. It's a complicated issue. The great news is that I do think that this has elevated a conversation that we need to have as a city, and it is really about who's being left behind, the unbanked, the underbanked. What are the barriers to them? Why are they unbanked or underbanked? Is it okay to be unbanked? And for those who want to get into a more cashless world, how do we get them there? And how do we make it equal? This is, nobody wants people excluded from establishments or any opportunities in the city. And if tomorrow we woke up and every business in the city was cashless, we'd have a very serious problem here. So it's a good measure that that's addressing an issue for now. There are exclusions in the bill, as you know. And I think it strikes the right balance for where we are. And we'd be happy to come back in a year or so and have this conversation again and have a larger conversation about the banked and the unbanked, which I think we have an expert on.
Yeah, hold on one second. Point of order, Councilman
information.
Jones.
Don't we have the Director of Opportunities and right there who represents the 27% poor people?
Yes, and you know what, I was remiss because I thought they were testifying, so both Will Hall and Mitch Little are here, so I was remiss in that because I didn't realize they weren't testifying.
No, wait a minute. Are you on the list to testify, or, I'm sorry?
You wouldn't.
It's right there.
Who? Okay. Because we also have Kevin Tonis and Will Gonzalez to testify. No? Okay, all right. So, identify yourself for the record. Councilman O, even though we disagree on this bill, I would totally agree with you. Getting a straight answer would be a nice thing.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Please, identify yourself and proceed.
Yeah, Will Hall, Financial Empowerment Program Manager, Office of
A
Community.
little closer, microphone.
Will Hall, Financial Empowerment Program Manager, Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity.
Okay.
Mitch Little, Executive Director, Community Empowerment and Opportunity.
Okay. I think Councilman Jones wanted to know, do you folks have an opinion on this bill, one way or the other?
Sure. I'd like Will to start and talk a little bit about what the city is doing and why this is a good idea in regards to disparity in those who are underbanked and not banked in regards to our Financial Empowerment Center and our Bank On program.
Yeah, and so we were very interested in this legislation because we too recognize it as a problem for folks who are unbanked and underbanked to be able to access not just cashless businesses, but also to be able to more cheaply be able to manage their finances day to day and to be able to do so in safe and affordable ways. And safety looks like a lot of things. I like the analogy from before that you can't become a $20 bill, but you can become a piece of plastic. However, I can take a $20 bill and that's now my $20 bill. If I take your plastic, you make a phone call and it's not my plastic anymore. And so we also are concerned that folks have access to financial products that are affordable and that are not charging opaque and unnecessary fees. And that is why we do work with financial institutions and local nonprofits as part of our Bank On coalition to promote affordable and safe bank accounts that and I know a memo was provided, don't charge overdraft fees on which not sufficient fund fees are structurally impossible, don't have monthly maintenance minimums, have waivable monthly charges, have waivable statement charges, so that way folks can actually use banks for cheaper than their alternative financial products. And so we recognize that folks who are in poverty and do live even worse than paycheck to paycheck, oftentimes have problems accessing mainstream financial products, but don't believe that the answer is to keep them out, is to lower the barriers for them to enter.
Okay, so to repeat Councilman O's question, do you support this bill as we sit here on February 5th, 2019?
We do.
Okay, all right.
One of them does.
We think that, we think that in its current form, I think that it is important, like was said earlier in testimony, to both understand the disparity and the need that exists in certain populations and especially in certain communities. How this might have an impact on specifically Black and brown communities, underprivileged and underserved communities, is something that we have to, as we march forward to the future, march forward responsibly and grow equitably. It is extremely important that we take that time to do that. So whether you're a senior who is used to using cash, whether you are a young person in one of our summer jobs programs, just trying to understand how you manage that paycheck in your summer exploration or employment, whether you are a person who's had very difficulty connecting with products that work. Every time you attach to a bank, you put in $100 and you have $30 left after overdraft fees and maintenance fees, et cetera, minimum balance fees, so forth and so on. So it is a way in which we have to think about how do we both provide opportunities for equity and inclusion for individuals. There should not be an opportunity for an individual to look at a merchant and say, I can't go there because of X, Y, or Z. And we understand that it is important, nuanced situation, because there are examples in which a policy or procedure or a practice exists with a merchant that it impacts a certain population differently. You go to a bar downtown and a bar might have a policy that they might not carry a brand like Ciroc or Hennessy, right? You could say that's a merchant's discretion. But to some folks, they feel it's really targeted to a particular population based on taste. Who might come in that might choose Ciroc or Hennessy? You might go to a nightclub or establishment, and they might have a policy around athletic wear or sneakers or something like that. You might say on face value, that's a policy, and a merchant or an employer has that particular discretion. But when you talk to people who are looking to enter those places, they oftentimes see those practices as targeted. And so I think it's good that we take the time, like our colleagues at Commerce says, to take a time to make full advantage of this pause and grow with responsibility and increase equity in our growth strategy.
All right, thank you. So here's, I think Councilman O wanted to follow up.
Yeah, could I get back to my questioning, Mr. Chairman? But since you said, do you pay your people in cash? Do you pay the interns, summer workers, do you pay them cash?
We do not.
Do you pay them in a check?
We do.
Do you give them a debit card?
We don't.
Like, doesn't the state provide like it's a, food program in debit cards now? And they
SNAP,
the
you're
card.
talking
This is the
about?
Work Ready program?
SNAP, yes.
The
Yes.
current options are a check or a pay card.
So,
Well, he's talking about Work Ready. You're talking about SNAP.
yeah, I mean, SNAP
Sure.
does it, and then we have a program,
Sure.
and then the program gives people a pay check, which means they got to go cash it someplace, check cashing, or go to a bank, To me, if we're going to go cash, if we're going to talk about cash, then it's cash for everybody. And, what the message it sends to me is that if you want to open a certain type of business, open it outside of Philadelphia. And I think how we help people is we give them jobs. We help with jobs. And there is a lot of technology happening. Unfortunately, they are taking up jobs. Every time we got a kiosk or things like that, that's another person not working. And listen, I walk into a bank and there's like one person behind the counter anymore. But that is what is happening, and trying to get on top of that and providing to communities that are poor the ability to be on top of the technology curve. I'll just end with this, that I was watching an old Korean movie about a guy who's on an island and he gets back to civilization and he's got no money, and I just wondered how he was going to pay for the bus. He had charged up his cell phone, and he paid for it with his phone. As Sylvie was saying, a lot of countries are just moving right to the options of purchasing off of your phone, banking, receiving funds, even funds from, support programs. They're moving away from going to a machine and taking out a ticket, a token, or whatever it is. I do see, kind of the issue of dealing with poverty around education, training, jobs. But the thing about the technology that has been so good for seniors, very elderly people, persons with disabilities, is you can press a button and a wheelchair accessible vehicle shows up. You don't need to know English. It'll take you to where you need to be. You know the price, it's all paid for. There's a lot of things that the technology can do, and I just don't know that telling businesses you can't do this or that. I think the customers will tell them it'll work, it won't work, and we're trying to mandate that everyone should be able to participate. But I do think that if we're going to do that, we should look at kind of like the cost of what it means to our economy, jobs, and other things. There are prepaid cards. I think there's ways to get them to people. There are smartphone technologies and other things. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman. Councilman Bass?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, afternoon, evening.
Still morning.
So I had a couple of questions, and one of the statements that was made earlier was that there was a lot of concern about the city being competitive, and that was the rationale for not necessarily having a very strong opinion one way or another, that the city wanted to be competitive. But I guess my big concern is that the city, you really can't move forward if you're not bringing everyone with you. And I think that that's been a problem that we've had over and over again. So I think that until we have, policies in place and things in place that really make sure that the divide that happens in our city no longer continues to occur, whether you think about educationally or economically or, things like access to the internet. I mean, the divide is so stark and so wide that, these are things that I just don't see how we can really move forward without addressing all of the things that are happening right now. And I know that your office is working hard to try to bridge that gap and bring folks together. But I just don't see enough movement on that issue to say that we're effectively addressing that, so that this is the progress that we need. What I see is that this will be, some will call it progress. I see it as an African-American woman who was born and raised in North Philadelphia. I see it as a way that you're able to discriminate, that you're able to discriminate against less desirable customers, that you're able to, to kind of pick your customers and say, well, you can pay, but we just don't want you here. And that's the way it feels to me. I can only speak for myself. And so, as we talk about cash-only businesses, one of the questions that I have is, about not cash-only businesses, but about these businesses that are going to accept only plastic and not cash. My question is, when we talk about doing the work in our neighborhoods and looking at this divide, can you go into some of the programs and things that have been done and policies that the administration has looked at to bridge that gap? What are we actually doing to make sure that folks in vulnerable communities are not being taken advantage of, are not going to be taken advantage of, and that they would be able to financially be a part of what's considered mainstream financial access in Philadelphia?
So, just to follow up on the comments earlier, community empowerment and opportunity, our office has financial empowerment centers all across the city to work with individuals with a financial counselor over a period of time to resolve either financial distress or to plan for an opportunity in their financial future. We'll talk a little bit about the Bank On program, in which we work with banks to help create and sign up banks to help create products that are effective and meaningful for folks who have not found good products or either underbanked or not banked at all, and increase that number of folks that are banked. We also work with Philadelphia Youth Network and sort of financial coaching and empowerment to connect young people to banks earlier on. And then we also sort of mitigate sort of stressors in our benefit access work to make sure that folks have enough money in their pocket to be able to manage money more effectively. So those are some of the things that we're doing around the city. But we're also working nationally with our partners in our Cities for Financial Empowerment, cities like Miami and New York and St. Louis, really promoting what we see as a financial justice imperative. Sort of what you're talking about, Councilwoman, to sort of look at those systems and institutions that continue to create disparity on our most vulnerable and continue to disconnect over time. Councilman Green talked about the cost of being poor, but also looking at that cost and then the ramifications of on one's credit, fines and fees, in which you are more and more disconnected from catching that rung up and creating the financial future that you like to see. So we are working diligently in that regard. In fact, we are making financial justice in the years to come more prominent in our work, and you'll see additional work from us as we discuss in our council hearings coming up in the near future.
I appreciate the work that's being done. I also want to, again, call to your attention that, this divide, it's huge. And one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of our neighborhood stores is you'll have, a cash-only business that's operating, but that says, okay, if you don't have cash, if you want to use plastic, then you have to use a $3 or $4 ATM machine that's in the back of the store. So, it seems to me if you can have the technology to set up an ATM machine, then you should be able to have the technology to be able to accept either or. And it's another way that folks are taken advantage of. So just as you look at, bank accounts and bringing folks into, mainstream banking, just making sure that people aren't taken advantage of on any level, no matter how they choose to make their purchases, I think that that's something that needs to be looked at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Councilwoman.
Chairman.
Councilwoman Gimm, and then I think we need to move on here. Councilwoman Gimm.
Just one brief sentence. Cash is legal tender, so until there is some massive change in the way that we are recognizing legal money, cash is legal tender. It should be accepted. It is completely different. We are not telling businesses that they cannot conduct business. It is a privilege to do business in the city, and we are grateful for them. But until something changes where cash is no longer recognized as legal tender, I think that it needs to be upheld. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you.
I have a question.
All right, if we can move on quickly, please,
Yeah,
because we got a lot of people here.
Real quick question. I'm not being a wise guy. I know it sounds that I am. Will the city accept payment in cash? I understand it's different. I'm just saying, will the city accept payments below a certain amount in cash, or it's just not going to do that?
Well, I don't make those decisions, but there's certain transactions where we say that we don't accept cash. So, I guess the thing is that we're moving towards an economy, Uber and Lyft, you can't give cash to your driver. We're moving towards an economy where certain purchases are done through online and other, through other ways of transacting. Cash is definitely still legal tender, but I can't speak to the decision around the city accepting cash. Now, there's certain transactions where apparently we do not accept cash.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Councilman, just to add to that, in my opinion, that's wrong. Okay, we can't tell other businesses to do that, and the city can't do it, so I think we're going to have to work together to get the city to start taking cash, in my humble opinion. So that's down the line, okay? Okay, there you go. Councilman O and I agree on something. For the record, Councilman O and I totally agree on that point. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Marconi, I think we have two more.
Kevin Thomas and Will Gonzalez.
Please approach and identify yourself. Is there anyone else that wants to testify on this bill other than these two gentlemen? Okay, good, because we do need to move on. Just ask both of you, please, to be as brief as possible because we have about 10 more people on a few other bills. And Mr. Gonzalez, I think you're testifying on another one too, so yeah. Please, whoever would like to go first, identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Councilman Greenlee, Councilwoman Sanchez, and all other distinguished members in attendance. My name is Kevin Thomas Jr. I'm the Associate Director of Operations and Asset Building for the Building Wealth and Health Network, a trauma-informed financial literacy program run by the Center for Hunger-Free Communities at Drexel University. Over the past few years, we have worked with over 500 low to no income Philadelphians to help get them banked, build their assets, lift their credits, and more importantly, lower their depression and break the isolation that many of us feel within the community. Our goals have always been to seek solutions to poverty that are based on empirical evidence and human experience. We know that one of the most important drivers of poverty is exposure to violence and trauma, so all our solutions to address poverty must include time and healing for repair. Our program combines trauma-informed care with financial literacy. The connection of the two is simple for us. You can't separate money from life. If we hope to develop each other financially, we implicitly must consider each other's life experiences and other traumas. I've been invited today to discuss the discriminatory practice of businesses going cashless and how the trend will negatively impact citizens of Philadelphia. When I told my team I would appear here to discuss the topic at hand, they asked me, if the city went cashless, how would we give $1 to the homeless guy outside? And if we did, where would he go to spend it? I think their response perfectly encapsulates the concerns that we have about this trend. It doesn't consider all of us. More explicitly, it discriminates against a good portion of us. Philadelphia has 400,000 citizens that live at or below the poverty line. That's over a quarter of the city. And studies show that poorer citizens are more likely to use cash than wealthier citizens. There are reasons for this. Many have been, as other members have said, have been disenfranchised from the financial system and can no longer get a bank account to facilitate electronic payments. Some may consider prepaid cards as a solution to this problem, but those who do are ignoring the enormity of fees associated with prepaid cards, an industry notorious with predatory practices. Digital apps do go a long way to help ease this issue, but that's under the assumption that you have a smartphone or access to a computer. At its core, the issue with prepaid cards goes beyond fees. Prepaid cards are a form of mental captivity on the community. They create the illusion of inclusion, as citizens can shop online and in stores without establishing a relationship with the bank or building credit. This means they're included in the commerce, but not in the ownership, as they won't be able to leverage their relationships to credit, leverage their relationships or credit to access the capital needed to buy homes, start businesses, or to take advantage of investment opportunities. We must also consider the process of loading a prepaid card and where someone would do this. How do you put cash on your card late at night when you need to buy formula for your baby? Where's that machine located? So prepaid cards are not a solution. Prepaid cards are just another way to leave people behind under the guise of caring and helping people living in poverty. Some may argue that the world is going cashless and you can't stop innovation from happening, nor do I think you should. My support for this bill isn't about preventing the inevitable, it's about making sure that all of our citizens are included in our future. We need innovation to create pathways for everyone so that everyone's money is valuable to every business. So that when a business makes a decision that they believe will help their business, they can do it in a way that doesn't discriminate or isolate our citizens. A few years ago, the government switched from analog to digital TV. And while it was a somewhat bumpy ride, they made sure most of the citizenry was ready to move in a direction that the technology was going. They gave deadlines and then extended them to make sure that as many people as possible didn't lose access. We should do the same. This bill stops discrimination and gives innovation and inclusion a chance to catch up. It gives opportunities for new ideas, such as no-fee starter bank accounts, broader and more appropriate financial education, and perhaps a city-owned credit union, especially designed for families with low to no income. Some are concerned that a ban on cashless business will scare away businesses and stop businesses from coming to the city. To which I ask, if there was a place with 1.5 million people and one of the fastest growing job and housing markets in the country, wouldn't you find a way to do business there? Or would you ignore the potential profits because you had to operate your business in the antiquated as of this month method of accepting cash? Any big business that chooses the latter opens the door for small business to step in, and small business is generally more in tune with our community. As a city, we cannot let businesses disguise discrimination as efficiency. We must support the ban on cashless business and push the business community to innovate new pathways for everyone included, even those that just have $1 to spend. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, please.
Buenos dias, good morning. My name is Will Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of SEBA. SEBA's mission is to promote the economic development and financial inclusion of the Latino community through collaborations and advocacy aimed at ensuring equal access to quality housing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify in support of Bill number 180943. We believe that at this time it is necessary to protect people who have yet to acquire the skills or access to some technologies. At the same time that Council is prohibiting, we hope that it also seizes this opportunity to think about the future, that you build capacity. Building capacity is very important, not only for people of color, but also for seniors, for low-income people, and for people who are limited English proficient. It is important to the future of Philadelphia that we not only keep pace with technology, but that we make progress and lead in that area. We have tools to make that happen. We have a healthy housing counseling group of agencies. We have many entities that provide financial literacy, However, we do not have the focus of making sure that that financial literacy component also teaches about fintech, that teaches about cybersecurity, privacy, enhancing digital skills, and promoting financial literacy in the modern age. It's very different to talk about financial literacy in terms of balancing a checkbook instead of talking about financial literacy when it comes to using a smartphone. We also understand that the future is going to lead to the use of smartphones, and we're blessed to know that the use of smartphones is increasing at an exponential rate, and that when you look at what's happening in third world countries where people are using smartphones to replace the use of other instruments, that we need to promote that and embrace that. We are not looking to exacerbate poverty, but to help lift people out of poverty when we try to build their capacity to go cashless. Again, I support this bill today, but I ask that council, the administration, and other stakeholders seize this moment to talk about this, to try to push forward the building of capacity of businesses and of people to use new technologies. The reality is that brick and mortar banks are on the way out. And the other thing is that there's issues related to check cashers, ATM fees. So we want to promote this technology, but we need to be deliberate about it, and we need to start thinking about it now and pushing it forward. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, and we agree. I think we said in the beginning that we're not saying this bill is the be-all and end-all, that we do know things, we have to keep moving forward, but we have to do it as for everybody, not just for some people, okay? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you both very much. Thank you for your patience hanging in there. Again, nobody else testify on this bill? Finally, we're going to go to next ones. Ms. Marconi, please read the titles, bill and resolution.
Bill number 190007, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the City of Philadelphia of an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter establishing and defining the responsibility of the Office of Immigrant Affairs, fixing the date of a special election for such purpose, prescribing the form of ballot questions to be voted on, and authorizing the appropriate officers to publish notice and to make arrangements for the special election.
Okay, thank
And
you.
resolution 190028, resolution proposing an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to provide for the creation and Office of Immigrant Affairs, to provide for the powers and duties of such office, and to otherwise provide for incorporation of the office into the city government, and providing for the submission of the amendment to the electors of Philadelphia.
Okay, before any testimony, Councilwoman Sanchez, sponsor the bill, please.
Thank you. I want to thank Councilwoman Janie Blackwell and Councilwoman Helen Gim, who've worked with the administration around discussions of how do we make the Office of Immigrant Affairs permanent. And I want to thank the administration for the meetings, not only with us as colleagues here on council, but with advocates. For me, the Office of Immigrant Affairs is about policy. Every single department should view the role and the expertise of the Office of Immigration to inform and ensure that we are really providing full access to every citizen and resident of the city of Philadelphia. So I want to thank the administration, look forward to working through this process, through the ballot initiative, and then for the full implementation of a fully funded policy office. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Please proceed.
Good morning. Good morning, Councilman Greenlee and members of the Committee on Law and Government. I am Miriam Enriquez, the Director of the Office of Immigrant Affairs for the City of Philadelphia. With me today is Joanna Otero Cruz, Deputy Managing Director for Community Services. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 190007 and Resolution number 190028, introduced by Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez, which would make the Office of Immigrant Affairs a permanent part of city government by providing a proposed amendment to the Home Rule Charter. If this measure is approved by City Council, a ballot question would be presented to the city voters in the May election. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. In addition to recognizing Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez for her leadership and guidance, we would like to acknowledge and thank Councilwoman Helen Gim and Councilwoman Janie Blackwell for their continued support, both on this legislation as well as other related initiatives that they have each championed over the years. Our office has had the opportunity to work with all of these councilwomen and their staff in a number of joint efforts. We are grateful for their partnership. We have been fortunate that a number of other city council members have also shown interest and have advanced issues important to our office. The engagement between council and the administration on immigrant-related issues has been great, and we have achieved some measurable outcomes as a result. By way of brief background, the city office dedicated to issues facing our immigrant communities was established by then Mayor Nutter through executive order in 2013. It was called the Mayor's Office of Immigrant and Multicultural Affairs, or MOIMA for short. At that time, leading cities like Boston, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco had established a framework for municipal operations and policy for immigrant issues and were advancing innovative programs that caught the eye of Philadelphia. In 2016, Mayor Kenny wanted to ensure that our city's immigrant communities continue to have a voice within city government. As a result, he established the Office of Immigrant Affairs. Because one of his goals is to have efficient and effective government, he moved the office from the mayor's office to the managing director's office to ensure a direct line of communication with operating departments. Mayor Kenny also wanted the office to be more policy-focused to assist in responding to both federal and at times state immigrant policy agendas that affect our community. In Philadelphia, immigrants have helped reverse 50 years of population loss, strengthening our city. In some Philadelphia neighborhoods, the influx of immigrants have prevented destabilizing blight, improved public schools, and helped spur growth in neighborhood commercial corridors. Today, our city's total foreign-born population totals 232,000, which is about 15% of our total population. That's an increase of 69% since 2000. And the 15% is the highest that we have seen since the 1940s. Furthermore, immigrants make up about 19% of workers, 14% of those living in poverty. And more than a quarter of Philadelphians in recent years, estimated around 390,000 residents, were either immigrant or U.S. natives with immigrant parents, together comprising a population with significant potential to shape this city. They include nearly 76,000 children under 18, or 1 in 4 children in Philadelphia. The city's Office of Immigrant Affairs, or OIA as it's often referred, works to promote the well-being of Philadelphia's ever-growing immigrant communities. OIA recommends and helps develop policies and programs to provide opportunity and access to services and information. And a major goal of our work is to ensure that successful inclusion of immigrants into the civic, economic, and cultural life of the city. In order to accomplish this goal, our work focuses on 3 main areas: policy and programs, economic development, and cultural programming and outreach. And now to listen to Councilman Greenlee, I will summarize the rest of my testimony. Our policy work really focuses around responding to federal threats that come down from Washington, D.C., for instance, DACA, TPS, public charge, also local policy responses. For instance, response to the PARS agreement with ICE access to our local prisons, and with our welcoming city policies, OIA worked very closely with the law department and was an active contributor to the lawsuit to protect our welcoming city policies. We also contributed information to the amicus briefs that support the travel ban, that supported other cities' challenges against the travel ban, the Census 2020, and of course, again, DACA. The city has a significant linguistic diversity with nearly 100 languages spoken, and as a result, language access is a requirement of our city. OIA manages the city language access programs, and as many of you know, it's a charter requirement that all city departments, offices, and commissions are required to provide services and information to Philadelphia residents in their native language. This is done through bilingual staff, in-person interpretation, telephonic interpretation, and document translation. OIA manages the vendor contracts that provide these services, but in addition to managing the contract, OIA also lends technical support to departments in the writing and implementing of their language access plan. OIA also trains city employees from leadership to frontline staff on language access. Currently, 42 language access plans are posted online and have been implemented. Every city department, office, board, commission under the mayor's administration has set up the use of language access. OIA has also engaged offices independent of the administration, including the district attorney's office, the controller's office, the sheriff's office, the register of wills, and city council. The city's progress in language access policies is evident in our data. Citywide, we have seen a consistent increase of 7 to 10% every fiscal year. for calls and minutes that departments use telephonic interpretation to provide services in other languages. Over the last 3 fiscal years, citywide departments have served over 80 different languages and dialects through the use of telephonic interpretation, and document translation has also seen a large increase, from 96 projects and 118 translated documents in FY16 to 201 in FY17 to 466 in FY18. OIA provided trainings to all designated language access coordinators, committees, and executive management, something that has never been accomplished before. Priority will be to continue training all direct public-facing staff across the city on language access and the use of language access services. To date, OIA has trained over 1,000 employees from over 30 different departments and offices across the city, and we're currently piloting and testing an online interactive version of language access training that will be available to thousands of employees through the city's learning management system. Beyond policy and programs and language access, OIA also focuses on economic development. We have been focusing our work on workers' rights as well as employer know your rights trainings. The Workers Academy, the Immigrant Workers Academy, focuses on many different topics to train our communities, some being some city policies like sick leave and wage theft, as well as other curriculum focusing around workplace norms, discrimination, how to advocate for yourself. And in response to both city council and residents, business owners, we recently launched employer know your rights trainings around I-9 audits and how to respond to ICE in your workplace. OIA also focuses on cultural programming, which is important to celebrate our city's diverse cultural cultures, and we do this in many different ways. One is through the celebration of Immigrant Heritage Month in June, Welcoming Week in September, and also through partnerships with other departments like the Office of City Representatives, launching the flag raising program, as many of you council members have been to at the northeast corner of City Hall, and that program has grown tremendously over the last 3 years, from 9 flag raisings in 2016 to 40 in 2018, celebrating 40 different communities in our city, as well as the Unity Cup, where we team up and coordinate with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and that program has also grown tremendously over the last 3 years, from 32 teams representing 32 different diverse communities in our city to last year 52 teams, and that will continue to grow as the years go on. Recognizing that we are not a direct service office, one of OIA's major goals is to act as a connector and a convener. In this capacity, OIA hosts a series of meetings throughout the year to keep our communities and organizations appraised of what is happening in our city as it relates to immigrants. Cities are at the forefront of change, and local government can make much needed change a reality. I hope that our immigrant communities will continue to be a priority for our future administration, elected officials, and residents. That kind of leadership is essential. However, this legislation provides a strong statement and safeguards to ensure that our immigrant communities continue to have a voice, a supporter, and a champion within city government. This concludes my testimony, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. And you folks are doing a great job over there. Johnny, do you have anything else, or you were just back up here?
I'm here for
If
any
you do, you
questions
got to be
may
quick.
have.
Okay.
No, we condensed it. It's all there.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
Okay. Councilwoman Gibb?
Thank you very much. I'm proud to be a supporter of the charter change and to make OIA a permanent part of the city government. I did just want to put on the record some of the things that have been discussed before, in particular with regard to language access, that there's a need to do more than just training and offering of services, that we need the office to do proactive engagement with, review of, and oversight when there are clear problems. This is particularly apparent when we have concerns around public safety from our immigrant communities and language access rights when people contact 911 or police departments for issues. So if there are any questions, discrepancies, and we certainly heard one in a hearing a year and a half ago about that, OIA needs to be at the forefront to be able to review departmental practices and proactively review language line documentation to make sure that that's actually being used. Not that it's just available, but that it's actually in use. I also wanted to point out that we discussed the importance of voting rights and ballot access and language access at the polls, and that, you know, every single election cycle, twice a year, we have a chance to make sure that we do not have to wait for commissioners to ask whether there needs to be language translation, but that we already know where people live, where there are high pockets, and that there should be a proactive effort to ensure that those divisions and those polls are actually provided proactively with the language access they need, so we can relieve the pressure on the commissioners to have to think this through on their own.
Yeah. Councilwoman, I thank you for your support, and just to note that all of those concerns that were brought up, we have started to look into them. We're started before our conversations, but based on our conversations, we've continued that. The police department, we are working with them to change the training detectives as well as upper level leadership in the police department in order to understand and change the culture, understanding what language access is. We went to 911 and actually sat through in the call center to see where can we minimize any time. We've now connected the operators directly with the interpreter and cut out that middle person to save 30 to 60 seconds. We continue to do that work. And as far as the voting, we have engaged the city commissioner. How do we increase our number of interpreters, the trainings, and really to do outreach to our communities so that we can have people from the communities being interpreters and also getting the word out that they're entitled to an interpreter when voting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. No other questions. Thank you both very much. Thank you for all the work you're doing over there. Ms. Marconi, I think we're going to call up people in threes.
Vofi Jabayev, Thomas Ginsburg, and John Chin.
And we're going to try this again. If you have written testimony, please, because we are really running behind here, and we're going to be bumping up against another hearing very soon. So please, just be brief. I think I'm fair to say you're not going to have any opposition in this committee, okay? So please try to make your statement as brief as possible. Thank you. Whoever would like to go first, please identify yourself. What?
One of our witnesses has to leave. May she sit up here and just go?
Sure.
Thank you.
And that's another reason why you want to make this brief, so that she can testify and get out of here. Please, if you want to go first, go ahead, please. Identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you very much. I apologize. Councilwomen and councilmen, Chairman Greenlee, thank you so much for allowing me to submit testimony in support of Bill number 190007. My name is Catherine Miller Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of HIAS Pennsylvania. I speak on behalf of HIAS Pennsylvania, as well as the Nationality Services Center, Esperanza Immigration Legal Services, the Welcoming Center for New Pennsylvanians, Catholic Social Services Immigration Legal Services, the Southeast Asian Mutual Assistance Associations Coalition, also known as CMAC, and the African Cultural Alliance of North America, Incorporated, ACANA. All of these groups enthusiastically support Bill number 190007, which, if passed, will ensure that a measure to change the city charter so as to include the establishment of an Office of Immigrant Affairs is included on the ballot. In the 2 short years that the current Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs has been in existence, the difference that it's made in the lives of the thousands of immigrants who live, work, and contribute to the city is immeasurable. OIA has improved language access, although I agree and appreciate Councilwoman Given's comments and Miriam Enriquez's response, across all city offices. It's worked with the mayor and the city solicitor's office on sanctuary policies. It's convened all of the major immigration refugee resettlement groups in the city several times in an effort to provide assistance to all of us and to all of our clients. It's worked on municipal ID efforts. It's collaborated with the Philadelphia Bar Association and several other nonprofit organizations to create free civil rights convenings to help ensure that all Philadelphia citizens are well informed about their rights, and to provide a mechanism for expanding the capacity of the city's public interest bar to provide critical naturalization services to low-income Philadelphia immigrants who are eligible to naturalize. Time and time again, OIA has mobilized on behalf of immigrants, ensuring their protection from overreaching federal officials and doing everything in its power to make Philadelphia a welcoming city to immigrants. These activities are critical, not just to our Philadelphia immigrant residents, but to their neighbors, colleagues, and communities who benefit from all that immigrants bring to this city. Study after study shows that immigrants revitalize neighborhoods economically, they create jobs, they pay taxes, they participate, and make good and active citizens. In short, they are just what Philadelphia needs to continue to grow and thrive. Therefore, making Philadelphia a welcoming city that protects immigrants and encourages, celebrates what they bring, and supports their business creations is a critical, full-time, and ongoing task. Making OIA a permanent fixture of city government recognizes this and makes it possible. On behalf of all of us who work with immigrants and refugees every day, we cannot stress enough how important OIA has been and continues to be in the lives of our clients and our communities. As Americans, of course, other than Native Americans, we are all immigrants. While some were unwilling immigrants, ultimately we all have stories to tell of navigation challenges, language barriers, discrimination, and fear of the unknown. Having a permanent government office created to help with those challenges is simply the creation of a permanent office of integration. In short, it is simply good sense. The sooner that those challenges can be overcome, the sooner that our immigrant neighbors can strengthen the fabric of our city and ensure that Philadelphia continues to grow and thrive for generations to come.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Mr. Ginsburg, we have your written testimony. I'm going to try this again. Okay, please try to summarize because we're really running long, okay? Or whoever would like to go next, come on. Make a choice here.
Hi.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Tom Ginsburg from the Pew Charitable Trust, and I will summarize my comments and keep them short. Just to be clear, we are a 501c3 nonpartisan independent research organization. We take no position on the legislation here. I just wanted to give an update and highlights from our report last summer about immigration to Philadelphia. From 2000 to 2016, immigrants increased by 95,000 in Philadelphia, while the U.S.-born population fell by 44,500. That left immigrants representing at that point about 15% of the population. Our research found that immigrants between 2000 and 2016 boosted the number of children, college graduates, and business owners in many neighborhoods. At the same time, they have added to Philadelphia's already large number of low-income, less educated, and limited English residents. By continent of origin, where they come from, immigrants in Philadelphia are diverse compared to the country overall. Here, the biggest number in 2016 was not from Latin America, but from Asia, a very broad geography. They have settled all across the city in many places, yet their still biggest concentrations are in Northeast and in South Philadelphia. Research has shown that it is the second generation immigrants, those born in America with immigrant parents, that tends to make the biggest leap economically and educationally. Our research has estimated that the second and first generations together in Philadelphia numbered about 390,000 in 2016. That was about 27% of the city at that time. That included more than 55,000 second generation children under 18. On jobs and the economic front, immigrants' growth has been striking. Foreign-born residents accounted for about twice as much growth in the city labor force as did U.S.-born residents. Immigrants were twice as likely as natives to report being self-employed business owners. Some industry sectors in Philadelphia and the region were more dependent on immigrants than others. Construction, for example, was disproportionately dependent on immigrants. The eds and meds sector, the largest in the city, employed the biggest number of immigrants at about 39,000 in 2016. When it comes to poverty and income, in other cities and around the country overall, immigrants tend to be poorer or lower income than the U.S.-born, but not in Philadelphia. Here, the foreign-born and native-born were pretty close economically when it came to poverty rates and median income. And I'll close by saying our research included a public opinion poll conducted in mid-2016. We found that members of immigrant households tended to be more upbeat about Philadelphia than native-born residents, less negative about the public schools, and more likely to say the city was headed in the right direction. Looking at all of our past polling, we found that increasing majorities of Philadelphians, all Philadelphians, were welcoming towards immigrants. Up to 69% in our 2016 poll said immigrants were bringing vitality to the city neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
Good morning. My name is Volfi Jabate. I came to Philadelphia in 1990. I currently head the African Cultural Alliance of North America, the largest African and Caribbean immigrant serving organization in the state, if not in the United States. I am here today to support this charter that will make the Office of Immigrant Affairs permanent. I also represent the Mayor's Commission, and I have been authorized to commit all of its leadership. Before 2005, African and Caribbean immigrant resident in the city of Philadelphia had been historically left out of everything, including public benefit and city services. Even though they equally pay their taxes like any other resident of the city, the resultant effect was that they had no voice in city affairs. Though, through the leadership of Councilwoman Jeannie Blackwell, the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs was created to advocate for the inclusion of all residents, including immigrants, in all affairs of the city. The goal of the commission included the following: to advocate for equal access and inclusion, seek and foster understanding about the continent of Africa and the Caribbean islands, engage in public awareness and dispense information on the rich history, geography, culture of the African diaspora people. The commission also set out to promote trade and commerce between the United States, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the city of Philadelphia. As we speak today, the African trade between the United States and Philadelphia has doubled. One major accomplishment of the commission includes presenting fruitful dialogue about how to strengthen multilateral relationship among all the peoples and support the city of Philadelphia in its multicultural and international global objective geared towards promoting the city of Philadelphia as a city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. The Mayor Commission on the African and Immigrant Affairs is composed of representatives from many organizations dedicated to the advancement of the African diaspora people. Some of the commission founding members organizations include the Coalition of African and Caribbean Immigrant Coalitions, the African and Caribbean Community Organization, AFRICOM, the African Cultural Alliance, ACANA, Jamaican Coalition, the Liberian Association, LAP, the Ethiopian Eritrean Association, and the Sudanese Community Association. Since its creation, the commission has expanded its outreach and brought together over 25 additional organizations, all of whom are members of the commission today. Therefore, city agencies, as a result of this work, and all stakeholders of the cities have been encouraged from there going forward to include immigrants, especially African immigrants, in the affairs of the city. Additionally, city officials have been encouraged to involve immigrants in the development of economic resources, such as the promotion of new businesses and civic participation in city affairs and educational opportunities for all. None of these stated accomplishments would have been possible without the vision and leadership of and the tireless effort of Councilwoman Jeannie L. Blackwell of the 3rd Councilmanic District, who embodied Major John Street to create the commission in 2006. On March 7, 2013, Mayor Michael Nutter followed suit with the establishment of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant and Multicultural Affairs. In May of 2016, Major Jim Kinney expanded upon the foundation by signing an executive order number 7.16 and launching the Language Access Philly, a program that is now a prior project of the City of Philadelphia and has helped stimulate access to city services for all. These works have expanded upon the original purpose and intent of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrants Affairs and generated and guaranteed the well-being of immigrant community and all groups in the city to have equal access to city services. The Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs support this very important drive to institutionalize the great achievement made possible through the work of the City of Philadelphia Office of Immigrant Affairs. We are here today, Your Honor, to support that effort. This effort is fully supported by the entire leadership of the African and Caribbean communities, including the African Cultural Alliance, from which I represent. We are therefore requesting this body to also amend the charter to make the Office of Immigrant Affairs permanent. However, let the record reflect that our community is asking for inclusion of a provision which recognizes the work of the African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs to be imbued in the language in the charter to safeguard broader administrative access. We are only asking for it not to be a one-sided thing where one community is disadvantaged by the other community. I hope that such language will ensure comprehensive participation of all the subsidiary commissions and organizations with similar goals. Recent study revealed that the City of Philadelphia has over 100,000 African and Caribbean immigrants. Many reside in West and Southwest Philadelphia, where they constitute 57% of the population. They are lawyers, they are law-abiding citizens who are business owners, academics, and professionals such as medical doctors, legal professionals, mental health workers, engineers, and nonprofit executives who are making meaningful contributions to the City of Philadelphia. I want to, in advance, thank you for your consideration
Thank you, sir.
of
Thank
our
you.
petition to you.
John, please.
Good morning. Today is the first day of the Lunar New Year, so happy Chinese Lunar New Year.
You too,
New Year
sir.
to the City Council. To honor your requests, Councilman Green, I will shorten my testimony.
I'm
And, just have
glad
a
somebody in this room listens.
few
Okay,
things
thank
to
you.
say. So, good morning, Councilman Greenlee and members of the Committee on Law and Government. I am John Chin, the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation, which is located in Chinatown. We are a nonprofit that serves the constituents of Chinatown, but also constituents from all over the city. I'm here to testify in support of the bill 190007 and resolution number 190028, introduced by Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez, which would make the Office of Immigrant Affairs a permanent part of city government. We are a city that is proud of our heritage and diversity. We embrace our identity as blue-collar, working-class people. We celebrate our highs and agonize over our lows together as one. Whether we are immigrants or families landed in Philadelphia decades ago. We live similar lives. We go to work, we go to school, we pay taxes, and we're committed to raising our families here in Philadelphia. We share the same heartaches, poverty, discrimination, loss of employment, illness, violence, and the loss of life. This city celebrated as one when our Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2018. The Eagles' pride was so evident in Chinatown. I observed many of Chinatown's residents and workers wearing Eagles paraphernalia. This was a reminder to me that immigrants want desperately to be a part of our city culture. The city needs to provide the pathway, Sometimes we do not know how, but if you make it easy, we will. My father and mother, as first-generation immigrants, exhibited that same desire. He would bake a turkey for the Chinatown Fire Department every Thanksgiving. It was a show of his appreciation to the city, which welcomed his family. Today, my PCDC colleagues help our families and small business owners navigate City Hall because our clients do not speak English well or are afraid to engage with City Hall. Our services run the gamut from helping clients with OPA to LIHEAP. And in conclusion, the timing to incorporate the Office of Immigrant Affairs is now. I support this legislation because it acknowledges the service delivery gap and sets expectations to eliminate that gap. Philadelphia is a gateway for immigrants and has been vocal in its welcoming of immigrants. We need to back up and be proud of our action by establishing the Office of Immigrant Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you all. Thank you for being here and the work you do. Ms. Marconi, who else we have here?
Blanca Paccio and Will Gonzalez.
Anyone else other than these two individuals testifying on this bill and resolution? Okay, good. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed. Again, I'm going to please try to be as brief as possible. Again, I don't think we've got a lot of controversy on this particular issue.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Blanca Pacheco, and I'm representing New Century Movement of Philadelphia, and I'm thankful for Councilman Greenlee and members of the Committee of Law and Government, and also to Councilwoman Quiñones Sanchez for introducing this resolution, which will make the Office of Immigrant Affairs a permanent part of the city's government. Thank you for the opportunity for letting us speak. New Century Movement is a Philadelphia interfaith multicultural immigrant rights organization, and we're representing 30 faith congregations, both immigrant and native-born in Philadelphia. We organize for a more welcome and just city, and the Office of Immigrant Affairs has a critical resource for our immigrant members. The office knows the Philadelphia status of a sanctuary city is not just a word, but they are practicing that every day, and they do it together with organizations in the city. Without action, being a sanctuary city, this is an empty rhetoric. OIA puts this into action, and it sends an important message to the immigrant communities. For example, I remember getting a call one night from a mother who was desperately trying to get her husband, and I was able to tell her that we will call the mayor's office to find help. And when I hang up, we reached out to Miriam, who's the director. Even though it was after working hours, she was able to answer, and her office got their hands on working to find this man. We were able to find him, and we were able to work together with the family to find next steps for them. On a personal level, OIA's quick response and immediate action means the world to people. They didn't have to leave a message and wait for days trying to find their family member. She wasn't turned away because of a language access. She was a priority in that moment, and she found access to the city government. She found an office that understood the crisis that she was in and the city that had her back. On a community level, this sends a message to all immigrants that Philadelphia is not just a sanctuary city or a welcoming city in pamphlets, but in action. A welcoming city, a sanctuary city, must be a real place at the table, not just a catchy slogan. And OIA's action moved Philly closer to that. They see people and they give access to power. OIA has opened a line of communication and engagement. When members were getting left on the side of the road because of Philly's livestock program, we engaged with OIA. Community members had a seat at the table to talk with OIA. When I started picking people outside of court or probation hearings, or a police officer detained a man from Brazil, as he called the police, OIA is there to listen and engage and to act. They are also open up venues of community to meet directly with Mayor Kenny. This doesn't automatically solve the problem or guarantee they agree, but the engagement to the access is imperative. The Trump administration is systematically working to deport all immigrants of color from this country. We see this every day as we sit in people's kitchens and listen to mothers left alone with their kids and a broken heart and their spouse being sent to York. Philadelphia has been a leader in challenging these racist and xenophobic policies when City Council and the mayor pass laws and policies that really see and hear immigrants, that honor the dignity and humanity of all people regardless of immigration status. This is an act of resistance. But we need more than resistance right now. We need to continue working to work on pro-immigrant policies that keeps promoting the values and that we hold dear and set an example on how this country should be governed. OIA has worked day and day, is part and must be a permanent part of the city's chapter. As the government continues to try to deport all immigrants of color, we also need to not only be against the physical wall that he's trying to build, but also dismantle all the walls that might be blocking access to immigrants in the community to the government. NSM believes that being a sanctuary and a welcoming city is central to who we are as a city and as people, and we must be in the charter. It cannot be left to depend on each administration to decide, as we are painfully learning with Trump, a new administration can wipe out all the good work. Making OIA a permanent part of the city says clearly to the immigrant community, we have your back. Having someone's back must be the long-term commitment to stand shoulder to shoulder, no matter what comes. This is what a real welcoming city is. We strongly urge City Council to pass Bill 190007 and the resolution number 190028. Thank you.
Buenos dias. Good morning. My name is Will Gonzalez. I'm the executive director of SEBA. SEBA is a community-based organization in the Latino community of Philadelphia, which promotes economic development and financial inclusion of the Latino community through collaborations and advocacy aimed at ensuring their access to quality housing. We support the permanency of the Office of Immigrant Affairs. Immigrants play an important role in the development of the city of Philadelphia. A statistic by the Migration Policy Institute estimated that 14,000, and I'll pick a subgroup of our immigrant community, 14,000 unauthorized immigrants in Philadelphia live in owner-occupied housing, which is amazing. And that's thanks to some of the work of the organizations in the city that facilitate, for example, that the settlement grant that the city gives to first-time homeowners is also available to unauthorized immigrants, and also to institutions like nonprofits like Finanta that provide mortgages for people who are unauthorized. We believe that the Office of Immigrant Affairs is doing a great job. However, it needs more resources. It has only 3 staff, and it's a lot to ask for them. They need to strengthen their enforcement, their oversight, and hold better accountable the city agencies that they look at. This is not about compliance by these agencies. This is about changing the DNA, the culture of these institutions. We are sad to say that, for example, the Office of Homeless Services, in its reports that it gave to the city for the last 2 reports, showed that there were 0 people, according to their counts, who were LEP. That is unacceptable. And at the same time, it is a lot to ask for 3 people in one office to have to look at multiple reports and then at the same time carry out the other functions of that office. We hope that this legislation is not only seeking to make it permanent, but to make it stronger. Another thing that's really important, and it was brought up, is its oversight and enforcement when it comes to agencies that are kind of semi-autonomous. Elections are coming up, right? So let's talk about the City Commissioner's Office. And the City Commissioner's Office, for example, not only has to comply with the city charter, but also has to comply with Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, which says that whenever there is a limited English proficient population of at least, that reflects 5% of the population or 10,000, all materials must be provided in that language. Philadelphia right now, the only language that applies is for Spanish speakers. And that is federal, right? And believe it or not, the City Commissioner's Office still has challenges in the way that it meets that federal mandate. So you can imagine when it comes to meeting a city mandate. So I agree with Councilwoman Jim that more needs to be done, but I think that it falls on the City Commissioner's Office itself with the support of the Office of Immigrant Affairs and not the other way around. Again, this is not about compliance. This is about serving the customer, and it has to be built in. I also want to highlight that not only is the Office of Immigrant Affairs an important entity for immigrants, but it's also important for other native-born, limited English proficient populations like the Puerto Rican community. Puerto Ricans are part of the U.S. We're an island colony. And the importance of equal access to government services was highlighted recently with a number of evacuees that left the island due to Hurricane Maria. Philadelphia is one of the top 10 counties in the United States in receiving evacuees from Hurricane Maria. Philadelphia received over 5,000 evacuees from Hurricane Maria. And so for people who are limited English proficient, the Office of Immigrant Affairs provides an important service. But again, I want to reiterate, let's use this opportunity to strengthen it and to enhance its ability to do enforcement and oversight. Last but not least, I want to invite you all to, I'm also on the board of the Hispanic Bar Association of Pennsylvania. On the 28th of December in Conversation Hall, which is upstairs, we're going to be honoring the head of the Office of Immigrant Affairs, Miriam Enriquez. That's going to be at 5:30 p.m. because we recognize the work that she has done. And we are here to support her and to ask that her office be strengthened. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you both. We heartily agree that Miriam's doing a great job back there. Okay. Nobody else to testify on this bill, resolution. Thank you. Ms. Marconi, our next bill and resolution.
Bill number 180820, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the City of Philadelphia of an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to change certain gender-specific references to gender-neutral references as approved by resolution of the City Council, fixing the date of a special election for such purpose, prescribing the form of ballot question to be voted on, and authorizing the appropriate officers to publish notice and to make arrangements for the special election. And Resolution 180834, resolution proposing an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to change certain gender-specific references such as councilman, councilman, and councilmatic to gender-neutral references such as council member, council members, and council, and providing for the submission of the proposed amendment to the electors of Philadelphia.
Thank you. Before we take testimony, Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. I am very active in a number of different organizations based on my role in this body, both National League of Cities and the Pennsylvania Municipal League. In those areas, they often refer to people as a legislative body as a council member. And so as I reflect on that, I start thinking about what do we do here in the city of Philadelphia and how we define members of this body. And so as I walk into my office, I see a sign that says council member all the time. However, when you look at our business cards, it says councilman. If you look at the testimony that's provided for even today's hearing, it's all over the place from council member, council lady, councilwoman, councilman. And even as we provide notices in this body, we're often referring to each other as council member. So we have somewhat of a schizophrenic perspective in reference to how we define people in this legislative body. I think to be consistent, we should be defining all people in this body through gender-neutral perspectives by using the language council member, not councilman or councilwoman. As we go into a next legislative body, hopefully we'll be able to move forward with this legislation. And with that, I close.
Thank you, Councilman. I was wondering why you had that sign up here. I was like, why does he have this sign up here? Okay, who we have on our list?
Jasper Katz and Sage Burge.
Okay. Anyone else other than these two individuals going to speak?
No.
No? Okay, fine. Please, identify yourself and proceed.
Good morning, Chairperson Greenlee and members of the Committee on Law and Government. My name is Jasper Katz, and I am a law student at Temple University and a legal intern with the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs. I am also non-binary, meaning that I am neither a man nor a woman. As a non-binary law student, I have dedicated myself whenever possible to transgender communities, mentoring other law students, training staff and faculty on transgender competency, and presenting papers on legal issues affecting transgender people. I am excited to be here today to testify in support of this legislative package and increase representation of non-binary people.
Thank you, Councilmember Green, for introducing this charter change and for the opportunity to support this legislation. This legislation and your support of it will have a profound impact on non-binary people. It gives us a chance to see ourselves reflected in the world around us, even when we might not know anyone else who shares our identity. I was 23 and in my first year of law school before I met a non-binary person older than me, and when I finally did, I cried. Without realizing it, I had always assumed I would be the oldest non-binary person I know. Discovering that wasn't true lifted a burden I didn't even know I was carrying and enabled me to envision a future for myself with an abundance of possibilities. In short, this legislation gives non-binary people a chance. It says that we are worthy of being included in our city's government, that we are worth the effort it takes to represent us, something I believe we all know to be true, but don't say often enough. Non-binary people gave me the language with which to talk about myself and the skills to be confident enough in who I am to come here today. This legislation is an opportunity for the city of Philadelphia to do the same on a much broader scale, to pull up an extra seat at the table and invite non-binary folks to sit down. This legislation will show us that we are not just included, not just tolerated, but also needed and wanted. I wholeheartedly support Bill number 180820, Resolution number 180834, and any measures to affirm and support women and non-binary people. This is a simple change with an incredible impact. Thank you to Councilmember Green, Chairperson Greenlee, and members of the Committee on Law and Government for your time and effort addressing this important issue that impacts non-binary Philadelphians.
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Greenlee and members of the Law and Government Committee. My name is Sage Burge. I am an undergraduate at Arcadia University studying sociology, and I'm also a policy fellow with the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs, which develops priorities for the city on issues including public safety, education, economic development, health and city services, and civil rights regarding LGBTQ Philadelphians. Thank you, Councilmember Green, for introducing this legislative package and for the opportunity to support this legislation that introduces more gender-inclusive language in reference to city council members. As a person who lives outside the gender binary, the words man or woman do not fit me. I often find myself being ascribed gendered labels that don't properly represent my identity. Titles such as councilman create an environment in which women and non-binary people have to carve out a space for themselves in ways that men do not. This is not only in order to be addressed with accurate language, but to exist meaningfully and hold power in the space. The barriers created by this type of exclusive language keep gender minorities from accessing leadership positions that enable them to make positive social change. Representation of marginalized communities in positions of leadership is invaluable in addressing the needs of those communities. Creating a culture in which non-binary people can be properly identified and affirmed within city council roles fosters positive representation in the city's government. For Philadelphia to actively include gender-neutral language in one of the city's oldest governing documents would set a monumental precedent for others to follow. This action would also demonstrate our recognition of the changing landscape of our society. Working in the Office of LGBT Affairs marks one of the first times in my life where I felt truly validated in my identity. For this to extend to other areas of city government would further show the city's commitment to supporting LGBTQ+ communities. I'm in full support of Bill number 180820, Resolution number 180834, and any measures that protect and affirm women, trans, and non-binary individuals. Thank you to Councilmember Green, Chairperson Greenlee, and members of the Committee on Law and Government for hearing my testimony today. I appreciate the time and effort you have spent to address this issue that impacts LGBTQ+ Philadelphians.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, again, nobody else here to testify on this bill and resolution? Thank you, Amber. Thank you very much. What we will do is, what we're going to do is temporarily go out of our public hearing, go into a public meeting, so we can vote on the bills and resolutions that we just heard. Those of you who are here for the THC, hang in there 5 more minutes or less, and we'll be with you. Chair recognizes Councilman, we're now in a public meeting, we have a quorum. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that resolution number 180834 be amended.
It's been moved and seconded on the amendment to the resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, resolution is amended. Councilman Green?
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 180943 be amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded on the amendment to 180943. All in support?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Okay, the bill is amended. Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 180943 as amended be voted out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and the rules of council be suspended so it can have first reading at our next session of council.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Record will reflect Councilman O voting in the negative. Bill number 180943 as amended, reported out of committee favorably with a rule suspension. Councilman Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 190007 be voted out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and that the rules of council be suspended so it can have first vote at our next hearing of council.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, bill number 190007 reported out of committee favorably with a rule suspension. Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that resolution number 190028 be voted out of this committee with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, resolution 190028 reported out of committee with a favorable recommendation. Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 180820 be voted out of committee rule suspension.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
And
Opposed? Hearing none, bill number, I'm sorry, wait.
I was going to continue the motion.
Huh?
And the rules of council be
Oh,
suspended
I'm
so
sorry.
this matter can be heard at our next session of council.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none. Sorry about that. Bill number 180820 reported out as committee favor with a rule suspension. Councilman Green.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that resolution number 180834 as amended be voted out of committee with a favorable recommendation to be heard at our next session of council.
All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none. Resolution 180834 is amended, reported out of this committee with favorable recommendation. That completes our business of the meeting of the Committee on Law and Government. I'll get this right eventually. And we will now go into back into our public hearing. And I'll ask Ms. Marconi to read the title of the last resolution before us today.
Resolution authorizing the Committee on Law and Government to hold hearings regarding the use of THC screenings for people on probation or parole in Philadelphia.
Thank you. Before we have testimony, Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This conversation is something that I think is important that we have at this time. The administration, working with First Judicial District, has been moving to reduce the number of people who are incarcerated in the city of Philadelphia. We recently closed House Corrections, and we're taking other steps to make sure that institution is permanently closed. However, in the fall of last year, Governor Wolf made a statement regarding it was a need to have a serious conversation regarding whether we're going to have recreational cannabis here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it seems somewhat contradictory. We're going to start that conversation, and after the conversation, we'll have at a later time in this committee that we're still looking at THC, which is an element in cannabis to be used for whether someone is violating their probation and or parole, especially considering that we currently have medical cannabis in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and a number of states are also moving forward in the space of recreational cannabis in this nation. So it seems somewhat contradictory that in one sense we're allowing medical cannabis to be used for people that have ailments, but in another sense we're still using an element in cannabis to violate someone on probation and parole, especially considering that the cost of having someone in jail is about $42,000 per year. And when you look at the fact that we have a major opioid crisis in the city of Philadelphia, we are then taking people who may have a screen of THC and sending them to some type of treatment, which probably can be better used for those who are dealing with opioid addiction. So I think this is an important conversation to have. We will continue to engage all the relevant partners in this debate, especially as we go into the budget hearing, and we'll have an opportunity to engage the First Judicial District regarding this policy going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Ms. Marconi, please call the first panel, please.
Larry Krasner, Keir Bradford Gray, and Julie Wertheimer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. How are you? Whoever would like to go first, I'm not going to choose. It's all up to you folks.
Go first. Start off.
Mr. District Attorney?
Yes, Councilman, thank you very much. I'll be fairly brief. It is the policy of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office not to seek revocation of probation and parole due to a positive test for marijuana. It should have been the policy for a very, very long time. A little bit of context in two regards. First, in light of what is happening nationally in relation to THC and marijuana, and second, perhaps most importantly, in light of what is happening locally in relation to probation and parole. I think it is probably very well known by people who are here that there is no such thing as a physiological addiction to marijuana, that marijuana kills absolutely no one, while a legal substance that frankly many of us enjoy, alcohol, kills people by the hundreds of thousands every year. Those are the facts. That is the reality. The slogan, gateway drug, is a lie. None of that is true. And yet, for reasons that are essentially political, for a very long time, this country has turned away from the sound social policy of having medical and recreational marijuana for adults because of the reality that it is far safer than something that so many of us use, beer, brown liquor, wine. It just is. If we look at the states where there has been legalization of marijuana, such as Colorado, we find they have a school system that is swimming in money. In 1 year, in 2017, there were $1.5 billion in marijuana sales in Colorado, and the tax revenues that flowed from that were $247 million, nearly all of it earmarked for education. The revenues were even higher in California that same year. Pennsylvania, standing in between the two, can expect something on the order of $300 or $400 million in tax revenues that could be entirely dedicated to public education coming from the legal sale of marijuana and many, many other positive benefits. Just one of them being that in Colorado they experienced a 25% reduction in fatal opioid overdoses once marijuana was readily available. It is a much better thing to take when you are suffering from pain. So there is a sound social policy behind the efforts, including the efforts of our Lieutenant Governor, to seek recreational marijuana. You will have it in New Jersey within probably 12 to 15 months. You will have it. And what you will see is all of the money that could go for this public school system going to New Jersey. Pennsylvania does not always have to be the last and dumbest one to come to the party. We should get that money for our public schools, and we should do it now because it's going to happen anyway. The other piece of context, of course, is the situation of probation and parole in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia. Pennsylvania is the second worst state in the United States for supervision on parole and probation. The second worst in the United States. It is the second worst in the United States for all forms of incarceration and supervision. Second worst in the U.S. It has been that way for a long time. It is the only state in the United States that allows you to have a period of probation that goes all the way up to the maximum for the misdemeanor offense you might receive. Frankly, a lot of our laws are out of whack. And that is how we got to have a state that has 800% of its old jail population rather than the national atrocity of 500%. And that's how we got to be so famous for having the most excessive parole in the United States and the second most excessive supervision. But Philadelphia is a particularly disturbing case study. In Philadelphia, we have approximately 40,000 people on supervision, under supervision on probation and parole, while New York City has 12,000 people. New York City is 6 times bigger than Philadelphia, or maybe even a little bit more than that. I guess it's 8 to 10 million, depending upon the time of day.
in New York. They're 6 times bigger. They got 12,000 people. We got 40,000 people. We have 300 probation and parole officers who are so overwhelmed that their caseloads are absurdly high. And what are we doing in Philadelphia? We're having them spend their time monitor marijuana use and then go to court to try to violate people who have gotten a job, have turned their lives around, are supporting their families, are paying for their homes. We think it makes sense to send those people to jail because they chose to use marijuana when they could have been doing brown liquor, like the judges who sent them to jail, and it makes no sense whatsoever. And that's why the policy of the Philadelphia DA's office is that we do not seek violations when there is a positive result for marijuana. Obviously, if there's more serious things going on, that's a separate question. But if the only violation is marijuana or THC in the blood, we will not seek that violation, and we will not try to put people in jail for that. I applaud the efforts here to look more deeply into the problem of having this supervision and therefore having it become a basis for revocation. There's a lot more that we have to do on the probation and parole front, and I'll conclude just by saying this. Perhaps first and foremost is we need to slash the number of people supervised on probation and parole. It should not be difficult when New York City has 12,000 people for us to go from 40,000 people to 20,000 people. That should not be a hard thing to do. And it's actually a good thing to do that makes us all safer when we realize that the science around this, and I'm speaking of science, not the perception, but the science around this, is that when people are on probation and parole for more than 3 years, they are more likely to end up back in jail for exactly the same offense. I'll say it again. When you go past 3 years, you are more likely to have people fail, lose their jobs, go back to jail, commit new crimes, because it is such an overwhelming burden when you've got your life together to have to keep reporting, to have to keep paying supervision fees, and frankly, to do things that never would have come to anybody's attention, like not smoke weed 5 years after a conviction for a pretty insignificant offense. So I applaud the efforts here to get monitoring of THC out of the supervision for probation and parole.
Thank you. Whoever would like to go next, we'll have all three and then we'll have questions.
Thank you very much. I am in very much agreement with the district attorney, and of course, we would back his policy not to violate people for THC at all. One of the things that we have done in our Criminal Justice Reform Committee that was formulated by Council President Darrell Clark and co-chaired by Councilman Jones is create goals for our system. We wanted a system that accomplished 3 goals. 1, that made effective use of taxpayer dollars. 2, that was fundamentally fair, meaning it treated people the same no matter what color or socioeconomic background you were. And the last one was we wanted one that promoted public safety. Well, the testing and violating people for smoking marijuana achieves none of those goals. And so if it doesn't achieve any of those 3 goals, why are we doing it? I think we're in a state of mind right now where we understand society's acceptance of what marijuana is and what it does, but the traditions of the law have not caught up to that. The traditions of the law still say it's illegal, and if it's illegal, therefore, arbitrarily, we're going to violate you for doing so, even though we have a district attorney who is no longer prosecuting people for just possessing it. But if you are on probation, and you're on probation for the lengthy periods of times that the district attorney just talked about, you are subject to go back to jail for doing something where you can't even be prosecuted for. And I think when we're starting to look at what sense that makes, or what goals we're trying to advance by doing this, we realize that it's something that just creates a burden on our already overtaxed system. It does not allow us to use our limited resources on the people that are using drugs that make them more desperate, that are more addictive in nature, and that are more problematic for our city. And for that reason, we believe that they should not test probation and parolers for cannabis. We try to get information about how much we spend on just the testing alone. We were unable to do that. We try to get information about how many people were tested, because sometimes the drug tests don't even match up to the original offense. If you stole a car, you are going to be drug tested for drugs. Marijuana is one of them. Your original offense had nothing to do with your use of marijuana, but we are using that as part of our screening. These are wasting taxpayer dollars. And I know, all of you know, our criminal justice system uses a lot of our local taxpayer dollars in lieu of funding the things that really prevent crime to begin with. I want to give you information from an insider's point of view for some of the things that we're doing now. Recently, through the MacArthur and Safety and Justice Challenge, and Julie knows about this very well, we created a program for called the Detainer Alternative Program, and also known as DAP. And it's really a unique diversion, not to send people back to jail right away for probation violations, but to give them some graduated response and helping them eliminate some of the challenges that they are facing while on probation. Well, since its launch in 2017, 163 of the 252 individuals whose probation and parole violations were referred to the Detainer Alternative Probation Program were only there for testing positive for marijuana. That's 53% of the people that we use intensive resources for were for marijuana violations. That means that they are now in a program where they have to go see or go to intensive outpatient treatment 3 to 4 times a day. These are people that work, that take care of families, that have all these other life challenges, and we are forcing them to go into an intensive program treatment for 3 to 4 times a day for marijuana usage, where we can be using those resources for people who are really addicted to higher level drugs. The waste is evident. I don't have the exact numbers. It would be great if we can get those exact numbers, because I'm sure they would be alarming. But what we're finding, even when we ask the people that we represent who are going in on, who are testing positive for marijuana, many of them are reporting using marijuana to sleep better at night. That's not a crime or a criminogenic tendency. That's not something we have to worry about. We're fine if people want to sleep and wake up and have a very good day. Many of them are using it for PTSD and trauma. Many of them are using it for pain. So these reasons are benign in terms of our notion of public safety. And this is why we are creating an endless cycle of probation for people who are being tested this way. I would really love for our court system, our laws, our statutes to catch up to society. It just makes no sense that we're not going to deter something, but we're going to keep regulating and we're going to keep using our law enforcement arm for something that has provided no understanding that it has reduced the number of people who use marijuana. So it's a process that we have used, it's a process that makes us comfortable, but it doesn't advance any goal for our system. And so with that, I would join in the District Attorney's Office by saying that this is a waste of taxpayer dollars and resources. It also keeps people entrapped in the system. And I will go further to say it creates a disproportionate impact for African American people, because many people who use recreational marijuana are across the board, all different races, all different nationalities. However, many of the people that we see in our system for marijuana usage who are testing positive for that are Black and brown people. So if we want to have a system that's fundamentally fair, then we will take out the things that create disproportionate outcomes when it serves no other value but for creating a disproportionate outcome. So with that, I will close and say thank you so much for introducing this resolution. Thank you for having me here to testify, and I really do hope that we are able to come out to a great result.
Thank you. Before we go to Julie, we both know who you are, but we know who you both are, but just for the record, I need you to put your name on the record for us, please.
Larry Krasner, District Attorney of Philadelphia.
Here, Bradford Gray, Chief Defender, Defender Association of Philadelphia.
You know, we have to keep everything legal here.
Sure.
Okay, please, Julie.
Thank you.
And you, please identify yourself and proceed.
Julie Wertheimer, Senior Director, Office of Criminal Justice, Managing Director's Office. Good afternoon, Chairman Greenlee, Vice Chairman Green, members of the Committee on Law and Government. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Managing Director's Office on Resolution 180357, authorizing the Committee on Law and Government to hold hearings regarding the use of THC screenings for the people on probation or parole in Philadelphia. As you know, as Councilman, Mayor Kenny was instrumental in leading the 2014 effort to decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana. In addition, this administration was recently supportive of the Council's recent passage of Bill number 180699, which, in addition to a number of other things, also decriminalized purchasing or attempting to purchase a small amount of marijuana. In line with the goals of the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge, which the Chief Defender referenced, to safely reduce our jail population, which as of today is down 42% from 2015, the Office of Criminal Justice, along with its criminal justice partners, continue to explore additional methods or strategies that will allow for the maintenance of public safety while reducing the flow of individuals into the justice system and addressing the racial disparities that persist within the system that the Defender touched on. We know that one of the major drivers, and in fact the largest driver of our jail population in general, is those who are incarcerated on some form of detainer, which includes county probation violations.
And to that end, we've been working collaboratively for a number of years on various strategies to reduce the number of people who end up incarcerated on violations. I was going to talk about the DAP program, but the defender brought it up. I will say that we have been proactively working to make sure that the people referred to that program are suffering from an actual substance use disorder and not being referred because of use of marijuana. Use of marijuana alone should not be the cause of mandatory treatment or incarceration for anyone. At the same time, we do greatly respect the independence of the judiciary and the individualized circumstances of each defendant. So we look forward to working with them and all of our partners to implement appropriate reforms. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you all. You really were brief. You're much briefer than the folks before. I'm impressed. Just one question, and I'll turn over to everybody else. I heard what you all said, and it all makes perfect sense. To ruin people's lives for marijuana, it makes no sense. But particularly, Mr. Krasner, you made the correlation with alcohol. Obviously, there is a point where alcohol impairs you to drive a vehicle or do other things. And I know there are times where, through the court, somebody is ordered to undergo alcohol rehabilitation, that kind of thing. Would you then say that marijuana should be treated pretty much the same way as alcohol, as far as like testing when you're driving, that kind of thing?
Well, I can tell you that in all the states where there is a legalization of recreational use of marijuana, there is also a standard for driving under the influence of marijuana.
Okay.
It's generally reflected more specifically in terms of how many nanograms of active THC are in the system. Pennsylvania has an anomalous and stupid law which says that if you have digested stuff that you smoked literally 30 days ago, and that's in your blood, even though none of it is psychoactive and none of it affects your driving, that makes you DUI. That is an absurdity that goes back a long way, but I am completely in agreement that there should be a DUI standard for marijuana, just like any other substance that can impair driving, including prescription medicines.
Okay, all right, gotcha. Okay, thank you. I think Councilman Green first. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here and in your comments. I definitely echo all the statements that you made. And I'm curious in reference to Ms. Bradford Gray. You talked about trying to get data from the First Judicial District, and I'm curious about your inability to get that data, and what has been the response from the First Judicial District. And I say that because this is a real disparity that's going to become more and more prevalent in our city and in our Commonwealth. The fact that you could be a person that's on probation and parole, but because you have resources, you can get a recommendation from a physician to get a medical cannabis card to deal with an ailment that you're dealing with, say post-traumatic stress or pain, as you made reference to in your testimony, that some of the people you've dealt with are dealing with challenges in sleeping. But then you can have another person who's also on probation and parole, but doesn't have resources, may not have health insurance, and he or she cannot get a recommendation from a physician, cannot get a medical cannabis card, but still dealing with the same pain as the first person I referred to. In order to deal with that pain, they're taking cannabis, but not medicinal cannabis. And in both of those situations, you have one situation where the first person, because they have resources, they're not going to come up on a screening because they're using medical cannabis, which does not have THC in it. But then person that does not have resources, but needs that same type of medication, we'll call it, to deal with pain, that does come up in their THC screening, and as a result, they may get violated and have to go back to jail. So there's clearly a disparity here, which I think is being promulgated by how we currently have the cannabis laws in the Commonwealth in reference to municipal, and also how we use THC in screening for probation and parole. So I'm curious in reference to, because of this discrepancy, what have been the commentary you received from the First Judicial District in reference to getting access to that data?
Well, I can say this. We got the information to testify here relatively recently. And so we did reach out to probation and parole. We did also reach out to the First Judicial District. And what we were told is that they didn't have enough time to get the information that we needed to testify for this hearing. So I don't think it's an unwillingness. I would be giving them the credence that they deserve in terms of saying that it was a timing issue. But I do think that information is really important to figure out how much we're spending
yearly on just testing for marijuana, and where could that money be used to really put in resources and treatments that we seem to have a scarcity of for some of these other drugs that are really creating more desperation in people.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity, because I wanted to make sure that it was a timing perspective, but the timing is also perfect now, considering that the mayor will be giving a budget address, I believe, on March 7th. All the various departments and entities that receive dollars from the city of Philadelphia will be testifying in budget hearings toward the end of March throughout April, so that gives us the opportunity to make that request in writing prior to their time to testify, so we can get information prior to it and ask additional questions at those budget hearings. From everyone at the panel, I'm curious on what you've seen in other cities and how they deal with this issue, and what other cities have done and changes to not using THC for screening, if they stopped doing it a long time ago or during the process of moving towards not doing it, and what were some of the reasons they made those decisions, if you're aware.
I mean, I know for one, California has been a pretty much a model for this recreational marijuana. I know Colorado has too, but we looked at California in terms of the laws that they were creating around this as well. Some of the things that they did in terms of just not testing it and not prosecuting at all, they also looked at records and expunging people's records, reentry, as a relation to that. Because this is now becoming a business. There are many law firms that are fixing up their practice to become regulatory sites. There are many people that are understanding the economics that are involved in this, and now there are still many people that are excluded from that opportunities or those financial opportunities. And so California has created an opportunity for people to get pardoned for their just possession of marijuana usage, and of course expunged if that is an option in that state. But I think we need to look at the back end too. All the people that have been kind of suffering for exclusion of jobs, exclusion of other qualities of life, we need to be looking at what are we doing once we know now that this is no longer the crime of the century that we thought it was when we were putting such harsh penalties on people.
If I might just add to that, there's a bigger structural issue here also, which is that many states are not even permitting you to go back to jail for a technical violation. That's what this is. This is a technical violation of a condition of your probation and parole that says you cannot use drugs. They're not permitting it at all. Not for popping wheelies, not for smoking weed, not for things that fall short of the commission of an actual crime. So part of what we're seeing here is that there is this culture of violating people for jaywalking, or violating them for, really minor things that a judge finds offensive that are only these kind of technical violations. That's not even available in other places. And what the public defender said is absolutely correct. Not only are we seeing that there is a reluctance to violate people for simply having a positive result for THC in their system, we're seeing things like the district attorney in Syracuse announcing that they want to go back in time and eliminate the convictions that people actually had in the past. This has been done it got done in San Francisco. It's being done in San Francisco, and frankly, Baltimore. It's being done all over the country. What we're talking about here, this notion that you violate people on probation and parole for marijuana use, is really a relic. I mean, not only is a lot of the statutory basis for this in Pennsylvania bizarre, but the levels of supervision are bizarre, and this notion that you can put people back in jail for this is really pretty much of an outlier.
Because I know, okay.
I was just going to say, we've been having, I think it went off.
I think it's on.
Is it on? No.
Hold on.
I'll just take this one. Oh.
There you go. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have been having some conversations with various counties and cities, and we're happy to share some of that research with the committee.
Okay, thank you. And I know some of my colleagues also have additional questions. I'll just make one last point, is that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I believe by 2022, the medical cannabis industry will be a $2 billion industry. Nationwide, it'll be about $22 billion industry. And I find it very concerning that we're talking about creating huge sources of resources that can be used for things like education, other things, but then we have people who are still being incarcerated because of them using that same substance. And we're creating this kind of, once again, tale of two cities. Those that have the resources get access to either create a new industry, create business opportunities, provide resources for themselves and their families and others, and creating generational wealth. But then others are using the same product, are going to be continue to be incarcerated and those type of things. And so I think there's been a movement, and I think Defender Bradford Gray, you made reference to that. There's definitely a movement that if we're going to have this type of medical cannabis and recreational, we're also going to need to make sure we're doing things from an expungement perspective, as well as looking at screenings and other things. That way, make sure that not just one part of our community can benefit, but other people are being detrimentally impacted by the same product. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Sanchez, please.
Thank you. I want to thank Councilman Green for bringing this issue up and echo his sentiments that we will be asking departments, every department that's part of the CJAP world, what the financial impacts and consequences are for these kinds of policies. I wanted to ask Julie from the administration part. So we've been working a lot around diversity and access to employment and jobs, and found that marijuana and marijuana testing, we spent quite a bit of money as a city on it, and it is a tool that has been used to exclude people from employment to city government. What, if anything, is your department looking at that, and will we see that more reflective in policies moving forward? Because every single department will tell you this has become a barrier to getting highly qualified people into the city.
Thank you, Councilwoman, or councilperson, I guess I should say now. I know that this is a topic that the mayor has spoken on. I know there are also obviously certain job classes within the city that marijuana just would be an exclusion like certain other things would, but there's a vast majority that it probably shouldn't be an exclusion for. I know it's something that the chief administrative officer and HR is under her purview. Have begun to explore. I don't know the status of those conversations, but we're happy to get back to you.
Yeah, can you also look at what happens when people test for drugs? First of all, how much money are we spending on marijuana testing, right, for applicants as a system? And then what are the penalties when folks, for whatever reason, get tested on the jobs? I think we have to, and I agree around restorative practices and how we go back and with folks, but even as we move forward, that we're being somewhat consistent in how we apply the application of this as a city.
Sure, and we'll make sure to provide the detail on specifically which jobs even get tested, because I know it's not all jobs by
the level of applicants that are being excluded for employment.
Absolutely, we'll get back to you.
Based on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. No other questions? No? Okay. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate all your time. Thank you for coming. Thanks for your patience, all that. Ms. Marconi, our next panel, please.
Allison Neff and Chris Goldstein.
Oh, yeah, I know. It is crazy. I heard two names. Is the other person here?
I did hear two names as well.
Pardon me?
I heard two names as well. I mean, I'm only...
Okay. I need you to speak into directly in one of the microphones.
Hello? That's good?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, great.
All right. State your name and
hi, my name is
proceed.
Allison Neff. I'm the clinical director of the UPenn Center for Carceral Communities, which is a community-based reentry organization that serves people returning home from incarceration. And I'm also an assistant professor at the Graduate School of Social Work at Westchester University. Thank you for having me. I know it's been a long morning. I'll be brief in my comments. I think the panel covered a lot of the really important points, and so I just want to emphasize a couple of things that weren't mentioned during the panel. One of those things is that in addition to increasing legal risk for people, probation, testing of marijuana can also increase physical risks and safety risks for people. One trend that we've seen over and over is that while marijuana is a low-risk substance, as the DA noted, and it also stays in your system for a very long time, so 30 days after using marijuana, it can still turn up as positive. Because people are fearful of incarceration as a result of that, many people have chosen to use a drug called K2. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. People refer to it as synthetic marijuana, but it's actually a very different drug than marijuana, and it's a very dangerous drug. Side effects of using K2 can include psychotic episodes, hallucinations, seizure-like symptoms, body convulsions. I
I worked in an ER here in Center City for about 5 years, and we saw repeatedly people coming in with major medical problems as a result of K2 use. But K2 is not a substance that's tested by probation. There are a few reasons for that. One of them is it's difficult to test because it's a constantly changing substance. We don't always know what it is. It also is a very expensive test. So people who are, for legal reasons, unable to safely use marijuana often use K2 and put themselves at great physical risk as a result. So that's one of the concerns that we have in terms of marijuana testing. I also want to mention that in terms of the legal risk, one of the sort of patterns that we've seen happen is when people have used marijuana and they know that they're likely to be tested at a probation visit and they're fearful of being detained, they become reluctant to go report. And so then what we have is a situation where someone is considered an absconder. I think for that reason, it would be great to hear the numbers from probation, but I think it's very difficult to know actually the true number of violations that really stem from marijuana, because many times people are actually absconding. And so what we see is that it's called absconding, but without marijuana testing, the person very well likely may not have absconded. Just yesterday, my team and I were in court for a person who was facing incarceration as a result of a positive marijuana screen. He was so fearful about being incarcerated that he was trying to get all of his affairs in order in the morning and was late to court and was almost issued a warrant because he was late because he thought he was going to be incarcerated for marijuana. So I think this process of fear ends up resulting in a lot higher risk behavior from people than we would see if they were not being tested for marijuana. I did include a few narratives of people who we work with in our community that I wanted to share very quickly that I think can kind of speak to this issue. The first one is someone named Terry. He's a 31-year-old Army veteran, and he's on probation. He's drug tested on a biweekly basis for marijuana and other drugs as a result of his probation. He was deployed twice overseas for his military service, and he has a diagnosis of PTSD. He did try prescription medications to treat his PTSD. He was having a lot of side effects. He was finding it difficult to function at the level that he wanted to. So he's been smoking marijuana in an attempt to manage his PTSD symptoms. He was violated as a result of this in 2017. He was detained at the end of November, was incarcerated. He missed the holidays with his family. He missed his mother's birthday, his son's birthday. He lost his job. He finally got in front of a judge in February, and the judge said, this isn't a reasonable reason to be incarcerated, and he was released at that time, but all of this damage was already done. Also, to speak to the issue that Chief Defender Bradford Gray mentioned in terms of the intensive outpatient, when he was released, he was ordered to participate in intensive outpatient treatment. Intensive outpatient treatment is 3 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day. And as you mentioned, Councilperson Green, this is a treatment spot that could go to someone with a really serious addiction problem. There's really no evidence that IOP is effective in reducing marijuana use, and I think it could honestly increase risk because we're cohorting people who are recreational marijuana users with people with very serious addictions and treating those as if they're the same. So I think in addition to the cost, it's also just clinically inappropriate. Another concern I'd like to share from just a clinical treatment perspective, and I'm almost finished, I promise, is that there are things that we know about what is helpful for people when they're trying to change things in their lives or to work on things like reducing marijuana use. Harm reduction is a strategy that's been found to be very, very successful in that effort, and what that requires is small incremental change where people have small successes and they build on those over time. It's sort of like any kind of change we're trying to make in our lives. If we try to do everything all at once, we tend to fail. And when we have the risk of incarceration looming over a person's head every day, instead of being able to focus on this sort of meaningful change process that we know works, what we have to do instead is frantically, and sort of in this panicked way, try to figure out how to get people to stop instantly so that they're not reincarcerated. So we're not able to do good work that we know how to do because we're having to constantly maneuver around this looming threat of incarceration. I want to share one more story with you. Actually, I'm going to do that very last. So the last thing is testing for marijuana is, I think, a very important racial justice issue that's been touched on already, so I won't spend a ton of time on that, but this decriminalization of marijuana in Philadelphia, I think, has successfully reduced
the numbers of new arrests for marijuana, but it really is not doing anything to help people, the over 40,000 people who are already on probation in Philadelphia, who are mostly people who are black and brown. So we have this really problematic dichotomy, I think, now, where we have wealthy people who have access to open these dispensaries and are making a lot of money off of marijuana, and simultaneously we're still incarcerating people of color who don't have the means, as you said, Councilperson Green, to get those medical marijuana cards. And I'll just finish with one more story. Chris is a 27-year-old who's been on supervision in Philadelphia since 2012 for also like a nonviolent offense to begin with. So we are looking again at these very long probation sentences. And I will just add that in terms of the legal risk, one of the things we see over and over and over is testing positive for marijuana becomes a reason to extend someone's probation sentence. And we have, in fact, recently had judges who've said, I will never end your probation as long as you're testing positive for marijuana. So even when people reach the end of their probation sentences, they've completed all other requirements. They're hearing you cannot leave probation while you're testing positive. Just to mention that as well. He's been using marijuana off and on throughout his time on probation. He's also been working, parenting. He's been coming to CBT groups. He's been attending college at Community College of Philadelphia, and he's just generally been a wonderful, productive, and contributing member of our community. He's been using marijuana recreationally since his teens. He struggles with anxiety and depression. In 2016, probation violated him for a positive marijuana screen. He was reincarcerated in the PPD. He was unable to finish his semester in college, so he received failing grades for all of his classes. He lost his job. He missed treatment for that period of time, so there was a gap in treatment. He wasn't able to be present with his son and parent his son, who he's very close with. He was incarcerated at that time for 9 months. After coming home, he is now still on probation. He still intermittently tests positive for marijuana. He is pursuing a medical marijuana card, which we believe clinically he would qualify for. However, there are lots of barriers to this process. There are only a few doctors who can do that. They often charge very high fees for that, and it's been really difficult. So just to kind of share some of the experiences of our community members, and thank you so much for taking time to hear about this important issue.
Thank you for coming
Appreciate
down. Councilman Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You made reference to K2, which is known as synthetic marijuana.
Yeah.
And has there been an increase in the usage of K2 that you think is related to what you spoke about in your testimony, the concern that someone may be violated for their probation or parole?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's been a huge surge in the use of K2, and it's really commonly known as like the drug that you can use when you're on probation. So as you know, anecdotally for patients I've seen in the emergency room, and certainly in our community and the people we've encountered, that's the common usage. And it varies so wildly that there are these bad batches. People are dying from using K2, and they wouldn't be using K2 if they weren't being tested for marijuana. So I think it truly is a public health problem, a very serious one.
Yeah, that's one of what you made reference to is one of the concerns I have with a lot of synthetic drugs, because these synthetic or designer drugs, they have all kinds of impact on people that people don't really know the impact, because they are designer drugs and people are constantly changing the chemical components in all different ways, which makes them very dangerous in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're seeing. So.
Okay. And I guess finally, just to close, in reference to your commentary, have you seen in your work in other jurisdictions, either peers that do the work that you do in other cities, what they have seen in reference to moving away from a THC screening process?
In terms of outcomes for places that have done that? Or are you asking about?
Outcomes, as well as cities who are saying we're no longer going to use THC screening, and those type of things.
You know, honestly, I couldn't give you very detailed information in terms of what some other cities have done. We do know that it does represent a significant proportion of probation violations, and as the district attorney mentioned, in Philadelphia, people are reincarcerated as a result of technical violations. So I think it's safe to say that we know that ending marijuana testing on probation would significantly drop the number of reincarcerations, and we have a really big problem, in the city with recidivism. So I think it's very safe to assume that we would see a significant reduction in that. Yeah.
And just to close, Mr. Chair, I think the stories you gave are a perfect example of the impact of THC screenings, where people who may have had a situation in the past are now trying to move forward with their lives and trying to have some type of stable income, provide for their families, but because they're dealing with some type of pain they have to deal with, that they can't deal with, they need some means of managing that pain using cannabis to do that, and then becoming violated on a probation or parole situation and going back in jail, and as a result now are not able to provide for the families, and then when they come out are still not able to provide for their families because they're being put in some type of treatment program that really is not for them.
Right, they're spending 3 days a week in treatment,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. So it's almost like an additional offense, or I won't say incarceration, but additional punishment, even when you get released, to have to go to these treatment programs that are really not going to impact you or benefit you. And we're taking that slot away from someone that really does need it because they're dealing with a different type of addiction.
Yep, and I think that from a human level, people just feel sort of defeated, like I've done all these things, I'm working, I'm taking care of my family, I'm a productive citizen, and this one thing means that I'm still, incarcerated, like as if none of those other sort of achievements or things they've worked on really matter. So we don't want people to feel that, that hard work they're doing to turn their lives around is insignificant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman. Thank you very much for coming down. Ms. Marconi, do we have who else is on our list here?
Adrian McGill and Dominic Speech.
Okay. Other, all right, I heard 2 names, I hear all kind of people getting up. Maybe they're leaving, okay. All right. So other than these 2 individuals, anyone else here to testify? Anyone else here? Okay, great, thank you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Good morning, I'm Dominic Speech from Power Corp PHL.
No, go ahead.
Good morning, Adrian McGill, Power Corp.
Go ahead.
So during my time at Power Corp, I have seen this administration move the needle in the right direction regarding...
Maybe a little closer to the microphone.
Oh.
Just pull the microphone a little closer, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, during my time at Power Corp, I have seen the administration move the needle for young people of this great city in the right direction. One of the things that we try to do in Power Corp is try to focus on barrier removal. And we see a lot of young people come in to our program that are on probation, and they violate time and time again. And we're talking the ages between 18 and 26. And the violation is oftentimes marijuana. It causes a stoppage in them being able to attend the program. Oftentimes they have to be out, to go to court to deal with violations, to deal with, the back and forth, different court dates, rescheduling. All this takes away time that they could be in the program, be at Power Corp, working on their skill development, working on their career pathway, working on, trying to improve their overall situation. Oftentimes, over the years, I've probably worked with, thousands and thousands of young people. Many times the first introduction into the legal system was marijuana, like going back to when I worked at CEP. I don't know if people remember CEP. It was a disciplinary school here in Philadelphia. You had kids thrown into a disciplinary school, or sent to placement for marijuana, and it began like, a constant tug of war of being connected to the legal system and not really being able to get free. We sit in meetings and we talk about, the different barriers that young people are facing in the city, trying to figure out why, some of the city's leading nonprofit organizations, Education Works included, why we're not able to totally eradicate certain things. But, barriers is the main reason why we cannot get young people to move forward. Any barrier that you can remove from a young person between 18 and 26, in my opinion, is going to pay out incredible dividends in the long run. Oftentimes we're talking about young people that are, struggling with trauma, have dealt with a lot of different personal things that have, caused them to lean on that method of treatment.
they're not leaning on Percocets, they're not leaning on some of the other drugs that most other people have the opportunity to. They're just smoking weed. They're trying to get through their day. They're trying to go to their program. They're trying to go to college. They're trying to, move in the right direction. But, they're bound up by probation. One Power Corps member comes to mind that he was an assistant crew leader for us, had gone through the program, became an assistant crew leader, doing everything he needed to do, completed his probation. He had probation that carried over for him to be, I guess he was like 18 at the time, 18 or 19 at the time. Probation carried over from juvenile. He completed it, was coming out of a corner store, got arrested with a small amount of marijuana. At this particular time, he was in alignment for a fellowship at the Philadelphia Water Department, and he was concerned that all this was going to be in jeopardy. Luckily, we have a new administration, and they had a diversion program, and he was able to get into that diversion program. And to date, he's now at the Philadelphia Water Department, 6 months in, working on his fellowship in alignment for full-time employment. Those are the kinds of opportunities that everyone should be, able to have when we're talking about like trying to close the wealth gap. We talk about closing the wealth gap, but we have to remove barriers that are preventing people from getting employment. Here in Power Corps, oftentimes we have qualified young people that we want to send to the city of Philadelphia, but they don't meet the minimum requirements, the drug tests, unfortunately, and they're not testing positive for anything egregious, it's usually marijuana. Luckily you guys are positioning yourselves on the right side of history here in Philadelphia to have the power to make sure that we can make these incremental changes that will allow people to have the opportunity to move forward. We're asking young people to move forward, we're asking them to move in the right direction, but we have to be mindful of the different barriers that we need to remove in front of them so they can, move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Sir, please, I think you did identify yourself, so please proceed.
Identify myself again, I'm Dominic Speech. I'm currently a crew leader at Power Corps, PHL, and a member of a PennServe advisory board. I'm currently serving a 10-year probation sentence, and one of the things that I witnessed through close friends and even friends that I have that are probation officers, a lot of the violations that I often see are from marijuana use. So those are some of the things that like my friends struggle with, and also being a crew leader, a lot of the members that come in, one of the things that they do struggle with are the marijuana usage and a lot of things that they go through as far as like PTSD, even pain, chronic pain that they have. Some of the members have been shot. One of my friends, my closest friends, he was shot August 2017, and he was afraid to leave the hospital because he knew they were going to prescribe him opioids, and he didn't want to be on the opioids. But because he was on probation, he had a hard time with the medical marijuana, and he was in the process of getting that. Luckily for him, he ended up getting off probation. After he was off probation, he ended up getting a medical card. So those are like some of the things that I witnessed. I don't necessarily deal with any marijuana, but a lot of members that I serve on a daily basis, these are the problems that they have. And I live in like the Frankfurt Kensington section, so it's like a bad opioid epidemic going on. But right beside that is the K2. The young lady just spoke about the K2 thing, and one of the things that my grandma is like her biggest concern is like the K2. Like that's the main drug that's around it. It's not the opioids, it's the K2, and majority of those people that are using the K2 are on probation, and they're not being tested for the K2. They're being tested for marijuana, so they're dismissing the marijuana and using the K2 to stay, I guess, free out of prison. So.
Okay, thank you. I think we all agree that as an alternative, opioids is not the right alternative, and oftentimes.
No, not at all.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you both for coming down. Sorry, you had to wait a long time, but thank you. Councilman Green, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing with Power Corps, PHL, and also being here to testify and give your story. I think both of your stories kind of really crystallize why we need to make a change and going forward to have people like yourself be able to move forward and be an inspiration, which you are an inspiration for others in the work that you're doing every day. So I think it's a great conclusion to this hearing. We will continue to address this issue as we go into the budget hearings, as I said earlier, to try to move this needle forward on this issue. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for what you do. Okay, now for testimony, law and government hearing on Resolution 180357, held to the call of the chair. Thank you, Councilman.